Welcome to Real Jam Radio. I'm Danny Leroux, your host, and so happy to be with you for this episode. This is a continuation of an annual tradition. Super excited about it. Arturo Galletti and I reviving the Over-Under podcast that we've done, and this is incredibly long. Most of you have probably already seen the length on this. This is just the Eastern Conference. We have a whole nother conversation, which is about this long, on the West, which is going to be next week's podcast, because I have to take the time to edit these monsters. But it's wonderful. Arturo is one of my favorite guests for these and, generally, of course. And you can also check out that he's doing work for Daily Roto now and helping them put together their NBA product. And this episode is brought to you by Bombfell, which is a wonderful way for men to get new clothes. I've been using it now, and so you go to bombfell.com/realgm and you get $25 off your first order. And FanDuel, a great fantasy option, and something I've been trying a lot more. Go to fanduel.com and click the Join Now button, type in RealGM, tells them you came from us, and you get free entry into a big money contest. And yeah, this episode's a monster. It's significantly over 2 hours, and it will have timestamps, so you can look in the episode description and you can check it out. It's always important with these, but remember that we talk about teams outside of their section too, because like Cavs and Celtics and numerous other ones, you kind of have to. So hope you enjoy it. I love doing it, and this is the East. Thanks so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be on. I think this is year, 5, 4? I'm not even sure at this point.
I think it's 4 or 5. Yeah, it's been a while. Some enterprising listener will go back and listen to it. And we're going to start this year with the Eastern Conference, which is, I think, actually what we've done most of the time. And the way that we do this for people who are unfamiliar is we go by the Vegas over-under projections from worst to best. It's just the way we've always done it. I do enjoy it that way. So if you want the sex appeal of the top teams, but I actually think the lower end of this are some of the more interesting ones for over-under purposes. And so, of course, that means we're starting with the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, actually, I did want to mention that, last year, for all picks, I went 70% right. Danny went 60%. I went, for the ones we said bet on, I went 80% right and 67% right for Danny, which means both Danny and I beat the big, right? So if we'd actually gone down to Vegas and put money on this, we would have made money. Because 2/3, and this is actually fairly consistent. When we say, hey, we feel good about it, generally a good thing, right? So, if you're in a place where you do that and you enjoy that, hey, take a chance, You never know. Okay, so let's start with, and this is actually kind of sad because it's the first time we haven't started with the 76ers. So I think, we can basically say, hey, are we burying the process this year?
Well, we'll have to see. That's just, it's going to be, when we talk about the Sixers, we'll have a feeling for it, but it's definitely a different stage in the whole thing this year. Hopefully they're better than that, but the Bulls, just on a talent perspective, they're at a totally different place. They won 41 games last year, but nobody cares about that, and so the lines that you pulled, one was 21.5, one was 22.5, not much variance between those two. What I was struck by, and I'm guessing you're going to feel the same way, is just that is such a low number that even though I think the Bulls are going to be bad, winning only 20, 21, or 22 games is just too low to expect for a team.
Yeah. All the statistical models think the Bulls are going to be better than that. So we have got 3 statistical models. One's 26, one's 30, and the other's 30. The problem being that I do think that the Bulls have no incentive to win, and actually I think they're going to try really hard not to win. So I think they want the draft picks. So it's a really kind of interesting conundrum because I don't think they're going to be competitive. And there's a bit of a tweak, which is this year is going to be strange because the NBA's been tweaking the schedule. So it means that you're not going to have all those scheduled losses that you typically have. So I do think that it's going to be easier for teams to lose a ton of games because you're not going to have those games where people just show up hey, they're on the fourth or fifth night for a game. This roster is not good. It's really not good. I think the trade that they made is one of the. It's not the worst trade because, hey, the Kings exist, but it's a really bad trade. I'm talking about the Jimmy Butler trade. Who's the best player on this team next year? For the course of the entire year?
Probably Robin Lopez.
And we're at
maybe
this point,
Zach. If I felt 100% that Zach LaVine was going to come back, it's probably LaVine. But without that, Robin Lopez is going to be a steady performer. He's actually not the type of guy that you want on a tanking team, even though he's not good enough to win you games.
Yeah, I mean, but you can work around that if you scheme properly. We can count on Fred Hoiberg like scheming his advantages out. Like, are we thinking Dwayne Wade's on the Cavs before the season starts?
I don't think it happens before the season starts, but I think it happens relatively soon. I mean, really what the question is going to be is that Chicago's going to start out the year saying, hey, you're going to have to give up a meaningful amount of money, and he's going to say no, and then eventually they'll come to a number. But I think it's going to be closer to, like, if I had to say December or January, than it is going to be now. Also because then Chicago can sell tickets like, hey, look, Dwayne Wade's still here. They can do that for a little while. But I'm not super confident in that at this point.
I think Cristiano, actually looking at this, like by the numbers, like Cristiano Felicio might be the best player on this team.
I like Felicio a lot. Like, it was a weird thing because I think he got overpaid, even though I like him. But also he's blocked because you can't play Felicio and Lopez together. So, like, I think that there are elements of the Bulls. Basically, I think the argument for, and I think they're going to go over, but the reason why is just because it's hard for a team to win 20 games.
Wow,
I don't feel comfortable about it, though. I would not bet this, but I
kind of feel it's going to be the under, and I kind of feel like, because I think what's going to happen is they're just going to give people they're just going to give people the night off. This is a really terrible team, and I think they're going to try very, very hard to get a lot of ping pong balls.
So a question I wanted to ask you about that is just kind of from where you're seeing this, will they need to be at like 20 wins to have the worst record? Because I think the bottom got a little bit better this year. But I mean, the Nets, we're going to talk about soon enough and all that. So I don't think they need to get to 20.
We'll talk about this. The Nets have no incentive to tank. So the Nets are, when we get to that, I'll be more optimistic for the Nets. But, like, we've got the Bulls, the Hawks, the Knicks, the Pacers, the Kings, the Suns. Who else am I forgetting here? The Mavs, maybe? The Grizzlies, possibly? I mean, like, we've got, like, teams, like, the race to the bottom is going to be really hardcore. And as I said before...
It's going to be thick, but I think a lot of those teams are better. Like, I think there are going to be a lot of teams around 25.
You're underestimating... This is what I was trying to do before the start of the podcast, which I was trying to simulate the schedule. You're underestimating the effect, like, getting rid of a lot of those back-to-backs and getting rid of those 4 to 5, because you don't... Like, that hard floor at 9... anywhere from like 9 to 15 losses or wins is going to be kind of gone. I think like you're going to get like most of the time you're going to get a team coming in at least on like a 1 day rest, or they're not going to be coming on 4 or 5. So getting rid of those scheduled losses is going to make that bottom, I think, lower. So I kind of expect that it's going, like, I mean, I think that 21-22 is probably right. So, I mean, I would be thinking for this team under and probably fade. Okay. I think you're going to go over and fade, and I think I'm going to go under and fade. And the problem is, like, I do think that they're going to need to, like, they might not win a game in April, or like they might not win a game in March or April. Right? Because it's going to be like, it's going to be kind of one of these nights where they're going to have a game where it's going to be Chicago and Atlanta. And, like, basically they're going to go into triple overtime because nobody wants to win, right? and it's going to be hell, and we're going to be watching it, and it's going to be like, oh God.
Well, let's go into Atlanta. I mean, so because we have our opinions on the. Go ahead.
Under fade and over fade, right?
Yeah. So with Atlanta, what I find compelling about them is from a talent perspective, I think that you're pretty much right that they're in this 20s, maybe a little bit low 20s range. But what I think is different about them is, first of all, I think they have a better coach. Budenholzer has done a better job with them, though he has never had coached a team this bad. So that'll be something a little bit different.
Well, but also, he's had some bad teams. I mean, we've seen kind of like Atlanta, like, well, remember that one year when they were hurt and they almost like pulled up the first round upset? But
yeah,
like, so,
that's true. But so where I'm going with this is, so their line is set at 25.5, is I think they're going to outperform their talent level, and I think I would play the over. It's one of those that's on the border of stay away, but I think I'd play it just because I think that they will outperform it by a little bit, and I don't believe that they're going to, even though Travis Schlenk might be a better voice for this than they've had before, I don't think that they're going to fully tank until it's too late.
I'm honestly, where like I think the Bulls number is too low. I think the number for the Hawks is more enticing because, again, I think that they're going to have to like go low to keep pace. Who's their best player? Dwayne Dedmon?
Dedmon and Schroeder, depending on the night.
And Schroeder is kind of like he's come and go. I'm actually leaning toward under in play for this team. And by the way, kiddies, like if you're playing at home, like keep in mind the under is always the best bet. Like if you bet just under on everything, the lines are actually like set so that there's like every team on average has like an extra half a win, right? If you average everything out. So generally playing the under is a good bet. Man, I think 25 it feels like 25, 24, 23. I think they're going to want those ping pong balls, right? I need to open the I'm going to plug the Real GM like drafts detailed because I want to make sure that like
they have their own pick.
Yeah, but I want to make sure that for the teams, I'm going to need this. I think the Hawks are going to be tanking, and I think 24-25, I think I'm good enough to say that that's going to be right. It's weird. I mean, it's just I think the incentives for this team are there, right? And I think that, again, I think the Bulls are going to be in the 23-24 range, and I think the Hawks are going to have to be right there with them. Right. I mean, would you disagree with that? I mean, are you saying over for this team?
I'm saying over. Now I'm going towards fade. I'm going to say over fade because so the reason is that I think they're going to defend, and so they're just going to win a couple of extra games by trying hard and being better in that way. Their offense is going to be abysmal though.
This is ex Spurs staff and ex Spurs front office guys
and ex Warriors too.
Right. And you remember what that kind of guy when they got into the tank in Philadelphia did? It's just they went faster. Which means, like, and here's the little trick for anybody else in the room. When a team plays faster, that means if you're bad, you're worse. And so by playing faster, I mean, they'll also, like, raise the point averages. Everyone will score more. They'll look better overall. And so it'll be really interesting. So I think that this team will basically just run, score, and basically raise the value of the assets they have, but they'll also lose a ton of games because they're doing that, right? So they'll just like, and that will raise the value of the assets they have in place, and that will put them in a better position to get the drafting. So I think the under, and I think play for me, right? That's what I kind of feel for this.
The other element of it that I would like to look into more if I have the time is who they play when, because I think they're going to be trying more at the beginning of the year. I mean, Budenholzer, a bunch of these guys are playing for contracts of varying forms. And so if they play, the Suns and the Kings of the world in November and in October, they'll do better than if they play those teams in March and April when they might already be mid-tank themselves. So that's something to consider.
It's a really, I think where the line is, like if this line was set like 2 or 3 wins, like say if this line was like 28.
Then
I think the key is what you said is like, what's it going to take to get those ping pong balls? And I'm thinking historically that's going to be around 20. And I think that the Hawks are going to be shooting for that. So that's why I went under. Do you want the over for this or?
I'll take the over, but fade it. I'm not going to bet it, but I just think they're a little bit better than this, and I think they're going to be competitive. But we could talk about the Nets. The Nets won 20 last year. I think everybody would agree that they got better. They're going to be healthier. And it's crazy because originally in the offseason, I was going to say they weren't. They lost Brook Lopez. But then getting Lynn back, getting D'Angelo Russell, getting Alan Crabb, Damari Carroll, they kind of went in a weird, not a win now mode, but a win more now mode. And so Vegas responded to that.
Vegas has them 7 wins higher than last year. Our statistical models all have them anywhere from like 10 to 12 wins higher. They have zero incentive to lose, like none. Like basically, like they don't own their picks. In essence,
it's now
like,
Cleveland's pick,
right? And everybody on that team wants to win because it's guys who like want jobs, like not necessarily here, but want somewhere else. So I mean, I love the over for this team, like 26.5. Like sign me up. Like I could not love the over more for the Nets. Right, particularly since I think there's going to be a bunch of teams. Like there's going to be teams that are just not going to show up to games. Like they're not going to want to win. And it's particularly in the East, it's going to be like across the board. So I think I love the over for this team. Like I'm good.
It's interesting because I agree with you on all of the incentives. I completely agree with you there. I just think that the models overrate their talent a little bit because of I think that there isn't really a theory of this team that I think is going to be successful. So their defense is going to be really shaky. They're relying a lot on Mozgov and young guys. Zeller and Jared Allen and Trevor Booker probably.
We've seen Mozgov be like a decent center in this league, right? Not a great one, but a decent one. I mean, like he was terrible.
and if he only has to play like 25 minutes a game or so, like if they're asking him to play 30, he's going to break down.
I mean, he was terrible. He was terrible last year, but he's been good or decent. Like if you go back like 3 years, he's been good or decent on like teams. So again, it's like the best player on this team is what, Booker? And Booker's a decent player. And you've got Russell,
I think the best player on this team is Lynn, probably. Lynn, and if D'Angelo brings it, D'Angelo. But I don't think it's Booker. I think Booker's going to be marginalized.
I think Booker, D'Angelo, and Lin is an interesting kind of like this is a team that has guys that I could eventually see playing on a good team, right? I mean, or have played on a good team, right? They're not great, but they're not. As I said, they're not terrible. I mean, even Zeller's been. It's a couple guys who were really bad last year, but I don't necessarily think they're like bad in the formation. I think again, this team could be like because we said again in March and April, maybe, hey, how did the Nets win 35 games, right? Because again, I think partly because they're going to play hard every night because they have no incentive not to, and they've got a couple of good guys. I mean, like if you get some growth from D'Angelo now that he's like this is his team, right? Then this could be interesting. I don't think there's any way they're going to be good, but I mean, I think they're not going to be terrible, and I think that 26.5 line, as I said, I couldn't love it more. I think they're like 5 wins above that easy. I mean, I don't see them like. Again, they're going to compete. They're not the terrible team they were last year. There's a couple guys there that are like kind of decent.
That said, they also didn't have an incentive to tank last year, and they still lost a bunch of games. Yeah, but they were worse.
Yeah, when we liked the over on them last year. It's just they got hit by the injury.
And I think they might run into that same issue again because my issue with the Nets beyond they're a little bit more versatile because they have 2 guys who can actually run the offense, which is a huge step up from one last year who was hurt for most of the year. Is that there isn't enough offensively for them to be good offensively, and I think their defense is going to be shaky. So let's say if they're bottom 10 in both, even if they're not bottom 5 in either, I think that's still just a bad team. And so maybe they win 26 or so. So I'm going to say under and fade. But again, it's the idea that it's like I can see where you're going with it, but I kind of think that the bottom will drop out just a little bit with this. They're not going to tank, but I don't think they're going to like rev their engines and be playing their guys 35 minutes a game in April because there's no real incentive there either.
It's going to be interesting. It's like we're like, and I'm going to ask this question coming into like, and we're going to cover it. It's like, who's the best team in New York, right? Because we're coming up on the Knicks, and like I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah. So let's do. Oh no. So you're over in play, right?
I'm over in play. Yeah. I mean, I love the over for this team. Again, I think it's 27. I mean, 26.5. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think I could be hitting that number before we hit April. Right. I mean, they might not win a bunch of games in April, but like I think I could hit that number in March. I think
the Knicks are fascinating. It's a lot of it hinges on a question that we don't have an answer to right now, which is how long is Carmelo Anthony going to be on this team? Because
I'm convinced that like Phil wanted to cut him, right, which was the right move to do. That was the right move. The Knicks were never going to do it, but it was the right.
Well, no, it wasn't the right move because then you're guaranteed that you're gonna pay him that second year. I don't know how he's feeling about that right now, but if you commit to that, then you're locking in a whole bunch of money for next year that you might be able to get out of.
Yeah, but you basically stretched him out and got out of it. I think right now, I mean, like you're not getting. The problem is like, and as much as people like to the story, Carmelo is a toxic asset. They're not getting anything back for him.
I agree with that.
Because teams just assume that eventually, like, the Knicks are going to go, screw it, and they're going to get rid of him, and he's going to go out the door. So nobody's going to pay you anything for him. I mean, it does sound like there was supposedly a trade maybe to the Cavs at one point that was on the table. But I mean, I think more than that, it's like any noise where you hear like, oh, Carmelo's good, that's his agent. Like, he is under that contract. He's a toxic guy. Now, if you can get him at $10 million or $8 million. To be the fourth guy, or a guy who's coming in as specialty scoring, he'd be great. He'd be great on Houston at the right price. But like, if you're bringing him on under that full contract, it's no.
Yeah, if there were an ability to use the amnesty waiver process for a guy in the current CBA, he would be somebody who would actually, the Knicks would get a fair amount of money back because somebody else would just be like, yeah, we'll get him for $8 to $10 million instead of getting him for 30 or 26 or whatever it is. Their line is set at 30.5. I think that they are more talented than that, but I think they're going to go under because they don't have point guards. And if you want to talk about teams that can drop like a stone in March and April, if they're not there, it would be easy for them, especially if Melo's gone by that point.
Well, here's the other thing about this. Like, there was, people forget, but at one point, like, Porzingis was like, rumored to be out of there, right? Like, he was like fighting with the front office. He wasn't happy. They were talking about moving him to Phoenix. So, like, I don't even know what the hell you're going to have on this team by the end of the season. I mean, I don't love this number because I know here's the reason I don't love the number is like every team that like this is the Iverson Melo effect. When they leave a team, the team gets better, and I'm going to get so much hate for that, but it's the truth, right? So my worry is that they're going to trade him and they're going to be better when they trade him, and I think that 30 number is a about right. Like, oh, I need to plug. So one of the models I'm using is from Jacob E. Goldstein on Twitter. He basically shared it with us, and so he has him at 37.5. I've got him at 32. Thing is 30, so I kind of like the over, but it's the Knicks, so I'm never playing the over. So it's over and fade for me.
I'm gonna play the under. We've disagreed more on this than I can ever remember us disagreeing.
Because we're going so early that it's kind of like,
yeah, I mean, that's true.
Like, think of, I mean, no, I'll leave you to it. Under and play.
Well, and these are all. I think the lines were better set this year. I think that's another element.
Yeah, I mean,
of
we're getting them. As I said, we're getting them early, so we're not getting the spread of lines. I mean, I think if the number was like, if I could get the Knicks at like 31, then yeah, I mean, I would think about it. But like, or if I could get them at 29.5, but like at 30.5, I'm like, I don't like it. Because again, I said that I don't know what the hell this team is going to have on the court by the end of the season. You know, you don't know their incentives. So, like, here's a better question: who would you have? Do you like the Knicks or the Nets to finish the season with a better record?
I think it'll be close. The Knicks. I think what makes the tiebreaker for me is that the Knicks have such a greater incentive to lose at the end of the year. So I could see them being close in late March, and then the Nets winning 2 or 3 more games and pulling past them. I could totally see that. Right.
So basically, you're saying that you're 30.5. You're saying that the Nets can beat that 30.5 number, which is why I was saying over.
No, I'm saying the Knicks are going to fall way short of it.
So like
I'm thinking the Nets win like 26 and the Knicks win like 25.
Yeah. Again, as I said, my problem is I think if they move Melo, you're going to see a better team, and they're just going to win.
They don't have anybody to replace him though. Like I understand where you're coming from it with those guys.
It'll be a better team, and it'll be like more of a Westall. Like, it'll be like, remember that Suns team where like he just got them to play better and like they won more games than they should have. This
team isn't nearly as good as that Suns team, but like I just don't think their I think their offense without Melo in particular is just going to fall off a cliff because they don't have guys. I mean, I don't know who they're going to start at point guard, but it might be Ron Baker. Ron Baker is not going to lead them to a successful offense, and Frank is talented. I don't think he's going to be that guy right away. And Ramon Sessions was terrible last year. It might have been because of injury, but he was terrible last year. And if they're going to go to Jarrett Jack, that's not an answer either. So Melo and Porzingis, you can build a competent offense at bare minimum with those two guys. But when you start to ramp those guys down, and in Porzingis' case, if let's say Melo's gone and they decide to put him on the shelf for a little bit for, let's call it tactical purposes, they could lose just a ton of games late in the year.
So here's the thing, like I'm convinced that this number is going to rise. Like when we did last year, we did like later. Like no, this number.
I'd feel a lot better about it if it were 1 or 2 higher.
Yeah, it's like I'm not. You're almost talking me into the over, but like I feel like 31 is like it's over in the 31, and like if this number was at like 34, 35, which it will be because, and again, people who are listening to this now, wait on the Knicks fans. The Knicks fans will bet this number up, right? And so when the Knicks fan get this like 34, 34.5, then you could feel happy to slam the under. Keep in mind, I am passing on the Knicks at 30.5 because 30.5 is just no. But in a couple, like once the Knicks money comes in and goes to 34.5, then I think Danny's under is the right play, right? But I just at 30.5, I think it's just a little too much for me, right?
Okay, so I'm going to underplay. You're going to overfade.
Yeah, I'm going to put a note down saying like I would like this number. Arturo would like this number at 34.5. I mean, I think 32.5. You could talk me into it. Like the under.
I think it's historically appropriate that the next team is the Pacers, considering the history between these two teams.
Yeah.
The Pacers are one of the hardest ones for me because I do think they have a competent starting five. Their bench could be okay. It really does depend on who they play and when. And I don't.
But this is a different.
I don't believe in it.
This is not like the what's his name? Their old coach. It's not where like they have that tough defense that's really hard. Yeah, this is kind of a play fast team, which play fast like run a lot of offense, and like I don't know how that's going to work out when the team's kind of terrible. I mean,
I don't think they're necessarily going to play fast with Nate McMillan on the reins. What's conflicting for me with the Pacers is that they're going to start this year at a better place than all of the terrible teams. And so you're kind of sitting there going, well, if they win a bunch of those games, then that could boost up their number. But they're not good. So it's kind of like, so you're competing these two things. So for me, it's a fade no matter what.
They own their own pick. They own their own pick, though.
They do own their own pick. But I could see, and this is another team where, and we'll talk about this more a little bit in the Western Conference, where the earlier trade deadline could really affect their number. Because I think they're still going to be, quote unquote, in it for a playoff spot in early February when the deadline is now that it got moved up.
But you're talking about 35
They're
wins.
not going to be a...
What's the 8th
Yeah,
seed?
but they're not...
Is the 8th seed in the East this year 32 wins?
No, I think it's around 34, 35, and I could see that maybe 38. I mean, the idea is basically that somebody will do well from the bottom teams, but... Yeah, let's say I'm going to say 36 or 37. That's where I'm going to put it for.
I don't think. Like based on the statistical models, they all have it under. Again, this is another one of those where I wish it was like it was a win higher. I like the under. God, I don't know if I'd play it. 31.5 is who's their point guard? I really, who the hell?
Well, they're going to either use Corey Joseph or Collison, so they actually have two competent guys, but not great guys.
Oh, Darren Collinson's okay.
Yeah, like they're competent. So their starting five is probably going to be one of those two guys, Victor Oladipo, either Bojan Bogdanovic or Glenn Robinson, depending on which way they want to go with their starters, Thad Young and Miles Turner. That's not bad. Like that, there isn't a glaring deficiency like there is with the Knicks. And they have other options in case some of these guys aren't good, and inevitably. But the concern is, like, if it falls, and this is why it's a fade for me, if it falls apart, it's going to fall hard because then they'll, like, move Thaddeus Young, they'll do some of these other things, and then they're right in the mix with everyone else for a top 8 pick or so.
I think I'm under, and I'm under in play, I think, on this team, because I think it's gonna, like, what are their incentives to, like, not, like, basically, why are they keeping this group together? Like, why are they not, like, trying to, like, get better people?
Ownership, coach. I don't think anybody there, I think everybody there is, I mean, Pritchard's new to the job, but I don't think he has a long leash there, considering everything with Bird and the weird circumstances. And, I think they're all kind of, like, pushing a little bit.
Don't they get a free pass this year, though? I mean, they got rid of they were losing Paul George, so they pushed the reset.
I don't think I think if they got a free pass this year, they wouldn't have signed Collison. They wouldn't have signed Bogdanovic. Like if they were doing a free pass, they could have easily had a different year.
I mean, how much are you paying? How much are you paying Darren Collison? I mean, like, and you can move Darren.
They're paying him $10 million a year. Paying him $10 million, but then he has a partial guarantee for next year.
You can throw that contract into a trade like that easy. And Darren Collison is a guy who can actually, like, be useful on a good team as your second guard coming off the bench, right? So that's a guy who can, like, put him on, like, the second unit on, like, I don't know, you can put him on the second unit on the Spurs if you wanted to, and he'd be great. They need a point guard. So I mean, you can move him. You can move Thad Young. So I think that, like, if the goal is to build around Miles Turner, right? So you're building around Miles Turner, that's your guy right now, then yeah, I mean, I think everybody else is movable, and you're kind of moving for assets in the long term, trying to get the best pick that you can, which I don't think they've never had a high pick in Indiana, right?
Paul George was, I think, 11, 10, I think it was 10 actually, but that's not high, that's not. I think that's about where they might pick this year.
My feeling on this is kind of, this is a bit of a lost season for them, and I don't like they don't have the pieces or the talent to really be good and competitive, and I think that there are better teams. There are some better teams at the top. So I mean, I'm I said underplay. I think you're underfade on this, right?
I'm overfade, actually.
Oh God, I don't think we've agreed. We haven't agreed on a single pick so far.
That'll change pretty soon.
I think I think what happens is I think the lines are set properly because we're not getting a lot of variation for us to play with. So I think have we seen a line that's been bad, or I mean I was happy with the Nets.
No, we'll get to some, but we haven't gotten to one yet. Anything else on the Pacers, or do you want to go on to the Magic?
No, we don't.
This is an interesting one.
We don't like the title division or anything on them, right? We haven't.
No. We're not there yet. Before we move on to the Magic, I want to tell you a little bit about Bombfell. Bombfell is an easier way for men to get better clothes. And I've been impressed with the system over the last little while as I've gotten to use it, because the way that it works is you can give them as much guidance or as little guidance as you want. That can be what kind of clothing you want. That can be price point. You can even do it for someone else if you prefer. And then you can tell them if you want about style, about what kind of fit you like, about all those sorts of things. Or you can leave it open to them. I actually left my initial one open and then put in more information for the second go round. And then they match you up one-to-one with a stylist, and they give you ideas. And so they send stuff. And the other great element of it is that you don't pay for anything that you don't want. So you get an early stage before it gets sent with what they're going to send you. Then you try it out, and if you like it, you keep it, and if you don't, you don't. And if you, something like, I had a set of pants that I really liked, but they just didn't fit perfectly. So there's an exchange system for that as well. And so I'm actually going through the exchange process right now. Super simple. They actually have the return mailing stuff with the initial shipment. So it's really, really convenient. And so you can just go through it. It's a fantastic program, whether you want to overhaul your wardrobe or you just want a few things or just some good ideas. I think it can be really useful for all of those types of needs or desires. And if you want to check it out, you go to bombfell.com/realgm. That's BOMBFELL.com/realgm. That tells them that you came from us, and it gives you $25 off your first purchase, which is fantastic. Again, that's bombfell.com/realgm. Bombfell, open and close.
Okay, Orlando Magic. At 32
so
and a half.
The Magic, we both liked the over last year. We were believers in Frank Vogel. They ended up winning 29 games. They disappointed. To me, one of the biggest disappointments was that their defense was awful. Anyway, this year they changed around a little bit. They got deeper, but the over/under is set at either 32.5, 33.5, whichever way you want to play it. And this is another team where I could see it working, but I think the under I'm actually going to play the under here just because the incentives are there for them to be bad, and they weren't that good last year, and they're young enough that I'm not expecting the big leap this year.
I mean, I'm a really huge fan of Jonathan Isaacs, who's their rookie. And by the way, like the line on this, the Magic are 32.5 is the low, 33.5 is the high. And that's 4 better than last year, which is 29. I mean, my problem with this roster is that it makes no sense, and it still makes no sense to me. Basically, I mean, I liked the guys they brought in. I don't think it makes sense to have, like, Bismack and, like, Vucevic and Isaacs, and they have Aaron Gordon. They have, like, they need to make a trade, and they've needed to make a trade for, like, 2 seasons. To like get some better talent in the building, but like a better mix, or this is basically a fantasy team that basically every player on the roster for football is a wide receiver, and they're decent wide receivers, but like you don't have enough slots to play them. You need running backs, you need quarterbacks. Like where are the point guards? Like who's the point guard on this team? Peyton?
It's going to be Peyton, and then I do like Shelvin Mack better as a backup than DJ Augustine last year, who was abysmal.
No. I'm not a fan of Shelvin Mack.
But compared to DJ Augustine was awful last year.
I've seen Shelvin Mack like put up some crimes against humanities in some games. So it's like no.
He certainly has.
Yeah, I mean, again, the problem is like you've got 4 decent bigs that you can get. I mean, they also had they used to have 5. They had Vaca too. Like I think as I said, I love Isaacs. I wish they had a clear deck on this team. I think they're trade waiting to happen. Something should happen with this team. I like Vogel, but I don't like the fit of talent. So yeah, I think I'm with you on the under, and I think they also have an incentive to tank.
Yeah, this is they don't have a protection or anything on their pick. I think that the element that's in play for them, like for the Pacers, is just where they are around the trade deadline, because they could be in a place where they're going to fight for it and all that kind of stuff, but I just don't think they're good enough, and I think that if they're fading it a little bit, we also have to see how they're going to go with the extension negotiations with Elfrid Payton and with Aaron Gordon this summer, but my instinct with them is they underperform a little bit early, and that they just sit there and go, well, what's the point of this? And then
shouldn't they have to move Gordon and Biombo? Really?
No, they don't have to. They don't have to do anything. I mean, it's a new front office. They can figure out what they want to do, and I think they're going to take at least the first half of this year to evaluate, and then at that point they're make decisions. But the problem is the Magic don't have many guys that are on really movable contracts. So like Vucevic, it's not a terrible deal, but I don't think anybody wants him at that price. And Biombo, it's a bad contract, and I don't see Orlando.
Isn't Gordon up for contract renewal at this point?
Yeah, he's on. So this is his last year on a rookie scale contract. He's up for an extension right now, and then if he doesn't get an extension, he'll be restricted next summer.
Yeah, I think they kind of need to. I think they probably need to move him. Because the problem is right now they're what? I guess he's going to start for them, right?
He's going to start at the 4.
But here's the thing. I actually think. I like Gordon, but I think I like Isaac better than Gordon. If I'm them,
I think the thing that intrigues me is the idea eventually, and I'm not saying right now because he's not ready, is to eventually play Isaac at center. And so you can play those guys together and just really run. Vogel's not the right coach for that system. That would be one way to do it, and then because Isaac can actually shoot, his jumper's nice, especially if he's playing the 5.
I wanted Isaac at the 3 for Boston, and I was deeply disappointed they didn't. I mean, I'm okay with Tatum. We'll talk about that in a bit, but like I thought Isaacs was a better fit because, as you say, he can play probably the 4 and the 5, and he's got some offensive skill set. He's raw, but like he's tall also. He's really, really tall.
He's a support player like that. That's why he would have been good on the Celtics. Is that if you have other guys to do like the fancy stuff, then he can switch on defense. He can hit open shots, he can run the floor. That's a really valuable player.
He can defend. Yeah, I mean, like I just looking at their situation. I mean, they kind of. Man, like because Biyombo would be useful on a team that's like going into the playoffs, wouldn't he? I mean, like just like a rim protector. Like there's like 3 or 4 teams that would just love him. Vucevic is a little hard to sell, but he's only $12.5 million. So like if you're New York, do you do Biyombo and Vucevic for Carmelo? If he says yes, Carmelo's not going to say yes, but
that's too much bad money long term for the Knicks. I mean, they would probably be asking for Noah in the trade or something like that just to send some bad money back. I mean, Biyombo, the big issue with him is you and I both like his talent. I mean, I think I remember us talking about his contract in a positive light last year, but he was terrible in the 2016-17 season. So if he's better,
Biyombo's under that he's under that African like age question mark thing, which has got me into trouble with Serge Ibaka's agents this year, where like I keep saying because in essence what happens is like for some of these players that like don't necessarily have access.
Because you have modeling for this, right?
I have modeling that kind of shows that the age curve for a couple of these guys is more matching with players 3 or 4 years older, and there's incentive for them to kind of pretend to be younger because their draft position goes up. That and scuttlebutt that, like for example, like in Ibaka's case, because his agent was taking the pot shots, as people were talking about this, there was a lot of like scuttlebutt that basically I think teams thought he was older than he said. So in essence, that means that like he was a more risky contract, which kind of explains why he moved around. He's still a good player, but like he's an older good player, and like big men that have had like the foot and back issues he's had are going to be like a tougher sell. Same thing with Biyombo. I think Biyombo, if you think Biyombo's a little older than he says, then that $17 million is a bit of a tough pill. Although it's not that bad. I mean, like it's 3 years. It depends on kind of what you're looking at, but it makes it hard. I mean, like yeah, I mean they don't have a. I mean, as you're saying, like Aaron Gordon's probably the most movable piece, but you'd have to pay Aaron Gordon, right? So it's like it's just like it just doesn't make any sense to me that you get Isaacs if you have Gordon and your coach is Bogle. So again, Orlando, a mess. So I think under is the play for Orlando. No?
Yeah, I do too. So are you under fade or under play?
God, this feels like slapping him in the face, but I'm under 32.5. I think that's going to be, they're going to need to lose. It's actually 33.5 for under. Yeah, I think I'm going under play. Yeah,
so am I. We agree. Yay!
This time. We had to go 6 teams in to get an agreement. This is like, yeah, this is kind of stunning. Good job, Vegas, of setting those lines, right? This is a good job by them.
And now we get one that I think we might agree on, but I'm not totally sure. The Detroit Pistons last year won 37 games. I think it was a pretty massively disappointing season for a lot of guys individually and for the team collectively. They did get better, I would think, overall. I mean, they added Avery Bradley, but they lost KCP. They lost Marcus Morris, but they added depth, which was kind of a killer for them. And I think one of the other big differences is that Reggie Jackson can't be worse than he was. There's some speculation that he was hurt part of last year. So the line was set at 38.5, so it's basically in line with what they did last year. And I think they're better than that. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to play it.
Who's the best player on the Pistons? There's only one answer to this.
It's Drummond.
No.
Oh, well, Drummond or Avery Bradley. I mean, if I would say...
No, it's the man who's going to get unleashed this year, apparently. It's Boban. It is Boban.
Your boy.
My boy Boban. So like, there's noise. He's been lining it up in the He's
been doing well in Eurobasket.
He's been doing well in Eurobasket, and there's noise that like they were playing him at the end of last season, and they're going to play him this year. And see, here's the thing with Boban is he looks he's so tall he looks like a center, but he's not. He's more of a Dirk type player. He is a finesse 4 who's really, really tall and almost impossible to block. So what you want to do with Boban, which is kind of what the Spurs did a little bit, which is like you put him out there and you have him shoot, and the defense has to collapse around him because you can't do anything with him. The only thing you can try to do is try to blot him out so he doesn't get rebounds. So he creates mismatches, and kind of like the Dirk thing where like he's shooting so high that basically you can't cover that shot. And if he's hitting, it's going in, so it's all down to him. It's basically like he's shooting open in the gym all the time. So he's a really interesting piece. I think that if they embrace that, and kind of like, because Drummond is good defensively and rebounding, but he's like very limited offensively. But Boban gives you some gravity, right? Buzzword, gravity. He pulls some shooters and should stretch the defenses. And I think this team is actually interesting. I do like the over on this team. And I'm willing to play the over. And I'm doing it because I kind of think that they're going to unleash Boban. And it makes sense with the roster they have to play him more. Also, he is so fun to watch as a basketball player. He's so cool.
Something else that's basic to note is that they have a win now coach. Stan Van is a win now coach GM. If they're on the margin, they're going to invest future resources because you never know how long he's going to be there. And so, they're the team where this starts to tilt the other way. And absolutely, even though I'm playing the over, I could absolutely see them going under. If it falls apart, it falls apart. And they're going to be relying a lot on Tobias. They're going to be relying a lot on Avery Bradley. This could go in some different directions. But I think they're better than this number, so I feel pretty comfortable going with the over.
Again, as I said, I love the potential. I think this is definitely a team that's going to be challenging to me, they're going to be challenging for that eighth playoff spot in the East. And as I said, I think they're not going to quit on the season, and they have good enough talent. The obvious play for them would be to trade Drummond, no? That's the play. That's the one that's been out there.
If somebody, the problem with that is it might take them longer to realize it than it will take everybody else, because he wasn't good defensively last year. And originally, and there is some noise in that number last year just because who he played with and some luck related to 3-point shooting and everything like that. But he wasn't as impactful. Like the issue with Drummond has been for a long time that when somebody comes into the league as on fire as he was, especially as a rebounder, but also you make these extrapolations about, players who are this good, this young, they become this. And with him, he hasn't improved at that scale, and so it takes a while to adjust to whether that's true or not.
Yeah, who the top, like Boban was like top 5, like top 3 in like per 48 contribution. It's geez. They just need to play him more. Sorry, but the same thing with the thing with Drummond has always been that his skill level, and I think this is the thing. This is why my draft model, and I didn't like him coming out of the draft, is because he was so freaking raw, right? And he lacks skills. He lacks skills around the basket. And do you think he's gotten better around the basket, or is it me just like he's basically the same guy he was when he came in the league? Is that just me, or
I don't think he's gotten much better, and he definitely hasn't expanded his repertoire in terms of like adding a 10-footer or a 12-footer, and his free throw shooting is still scary as all get out. So it's a big problem. Is
it bad that I think that his best case scenario is being more like Ben Wallace than trying to be like a guy who like DeAndre Jordan, or was like a guy?
I don't think he can be nearly as good defensively as Ben Wallace was. Maybe offense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think I would go tall on this team and just have him and Boban out there and like have Boban. But again, Boban you have to use like a 4 who is like stretching the floor, right? Kind of what LaMarcus tries to be, but I think he's really good at shooting, and have him do that and then run around that, and then have Drummond just be the guy who kind of comes in and cleans up and dunks the ball, right? Which I think is.
I would actually, taking that logic, when Boban's in there, maybe punt a little bit more on defense and go a little bit more floor spacing and create lanes for guys like Reggie Jackson and Tobias Harris to go through. Play him at the 5 and just say we're going to be worse defensively for those.
But imagine if you had Boban together with DeAndre, and DeAndre would or somebody like Birdman, somebody who's like an elite rebounder who's going to basically just anything that he misses or goes off the floor, and he's going to have these lanes to come in and dunk the freaking ball. Right, just grab the ball, dunk it, right? Because what's going to happen is the defense defense should collapse in that direction, and you're sitting there on the lane looking for the rebound and the putback. And I think that's the right play to do based on the skill set that you have. You have a guy who has some skills at shooting, and you have a guy who's tall and can dunk, right? And again, this is, I think, the best use for Drummond, which is rebounds and putbacks. I think that's where his value is on the basketball court on the offensive end. I think that's my opinion of him, of what I've seen of him. He feasts when he can actually have those open lanes. Again,
Yeah, that's a fair point. But so we're both overplay.
I think we're.
Are
both,
we over?
Yeah, we're both overplay on that. I put Boban with an asterisk. Do we like anything else about this team? Like, no, right? I don't think we know. No rookies, no MVP candidates, no.
No, it's not that type of team. And the division odds, I mean, there's an outside shot of it if Cleveland underperforms, but there are too many teams in front of them too. Because remember, Milwaukee's in the same division.
Yeah, I'm gonna be flip. Like, where I always kind of hate the Cleveland number this year. I think like their depth. We'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah, we'll talk about it when we get there. But so I think we're there with Detroit, Philadelphia. So the Sixers won 28 games last year. Disappointed a little bit because of Joel Embiid's injury. I mean, they were phenomenal when he played, and they were distinctly not phenomenal when he didn't play. But this is the first legitimately terrible line that is out there. I am a Sixers optimist. You and I said like 2 or 3 years ago that we thought they could eventually be a playoff team. I said during the offseason that I thought they could be a playoff team this year. I would not have set the over-under number at 40.5 or 41.5. So for me, this is one of the easiest ones of the entire board. Even though I like the Sixers and I trust the process, play it and don't even think about it.
Under? Really?
Oh, under by a county mile.
So let's
I love the Sixers. You know
let's talk this out. This team won 28 games last season, right? So they won 28 games last season. And they won the 28 games basically Joel Embiid playing, 800 minutes from Joel Embiid, like basically, no Ben Simmons. Basically, you're taking that and you're adding Futz, you're adding Simmons. You're basically adding 2 number 1 picks. You're adding JJ Redick to the equation. You're adding Sarek, who got better as the season get on. This is a decent team.
It's a decent team. I mean, I think they're going to win. I think they're going to be competing for the 8th seed, but competing for the 8th seed and setting an over-under line for me it's an EV equation. I think if you were to tell me that Joel Embiid was going to play 70, 75 games, sure, I could see this, but there's no guarantee of that.
If one of Foots, Simmons, if one of these things so you basically, the first part of this is you're betting on how many games Joel Embiid is going to play. So I think if Joel Embiid plays and he gets 2,000 minutes, this is a way over. If he plays 2,000 minutes, this is way over. This is easy, right? And if that happens and one of Simmons or Fultz is good, not great, good this season, then you're talking about 45-46 for this team, right? Granted, there's 2 if statements, but you don't have to go far to get to... I know why this line was 40 and a half, because I think this line is right at 40 and a half. I think this is kind of, given how many terrible teams we just went through, I think this is over. I don't know if I'd play it, though. Because I was expecting this to be like 38 when they were first talking about it, and at this level, it's kind of like harder. Question for you. You think Fultz is going to be a good player this year?
Eventually, yes. This year, no. I mean, what you have with a lot of this stuff. So last year, I think it was with RPM, but you can use basically any of these big numbers that you want. There were only 2 players that were net positives last year that were rookies. And I think that Fultz is going to be a good player.
I would consider the last draft. You could take the last draft and set it on fire. That was one of the most terrible drafts in the last 15 years.
I mean, that's fairly true, but I mean, at the same point...
And I've said this. So outside of Simmons, which player, does any player in last year's draft go in the top 10 this year? Outside of Simmons.
Top 10. So, Jamal Murray would. I really like Jamal Murray.
What did Jamal Murray go in the draft last year?
He went 6 or 7.
You think Jamal Murray's going over like really over who? Like let's you said 6 or 7.
I think he goes over Markkanen. Well, maybe not over Markkanen, but I think he goes. I mean, remember, like Frank Ntilikina went in the top 10 this year. Jamal Murray was a better prospect than Frank ever was. Now, if you're going to say who goes top 5, then you start to get into a very interesting question.
Nobody. I don't think anybody goes top. I think Simmons goes.
Simmons goes top 5. Absolutely.
Simmons goes 2 or 3. Depending. I think he goes 3. I think Simmons would go 3 to the Celtics, and I would be much, much happier.
I would rather... I thought Simmons was a better prospect than Lonzo Ball, personally, just because Lonzo has these really weird flaws that scare me. Lonzo's ceiling is crazy high, but his floor
my thing on this is I watch so much film, and Lonzo sees things. And again... Yeah, but Lonzo is on the court, and he is smarter than everybody on the court. He sees things, and part of the problem he had in college, like, he would see things and get pissed at people when they wouldn't see it. So this is kind of what Magic used to talk about when he was coaching. It's that kind of thing where, like, with NBA talent, he's, like, I don't see any way where he's not but we'll talk a little more about Lonzo. But, yeah, I mean, again, the problem, as I said, that draft was terrible. Don't judge by that. On the under, if you're saying the under on the Sixers, right? You're saying the under on the Sixers. You're saying Embiid's not playing more than 1,500 minutes. He's not. He's just not. You're not getting it. There's no improvement from, like, a guy like Zarek, right? And Simmons and Fultz are kind of bad. And also, I mean, keep in mind, they're playing a bunch of terrible teams in the East, right? So I think 40.5 is kind of, I mean, I think 40.5 is there for them because, like, nobody's going to, like, there's going to be people where
it's there for them. Like, it's like, I think it's like a 40 or 45% outcome. But that's not enough to make me bet the over because they're 55% or so that's on the other side.
You don't think this team wins half their games?
No. If you were to tell me that Embiid was going to play 70-plus games, then yeah, I would. But I don't believe in that. I think they're going to be exceedingly cautious with him, not only in terms of back-to-backs, but in terms of if he has anything, they're going to keep him out an extra couple games because they might as well, and he's going to be a free agent. Let's not forget.
Let me ask you more.
You have all these things running together.
I think it's going to wind up. I'm going to wind up over. You're going to wind up under. We're both going to fade this, right? Or you're going to play it?
No, I'm going to play the under. Absolutely.
Ooh, you're brave. I would not play the under on this team. Because they, again, I think this is the season where they start going for it. And keep in mind, this is a different front office. This is a Colangelo team. So this is the team. This team will try to max out what they have. And I'm going to fade. Again, I thought this was going to be like 40.5.
I mean, keep in mind, like, so this is a good example here. Denver and Portland last year won 40 and 41 games. Those teams, like, I mean, yeah, Denver had turnover with Jokic and Nurkic and all that sort of stuff. But they were, those were legitimately good teams. Those were consistent. They didn't have the same concerns that we have here. It's not a slam dunk.
Is this team better than last year's Pacers?
Well, I mean, they're very different. I mean, I think that their ceiling is higher, but I think their floor is lower.
What do you think of their division bet, which is 10-1? So
my concern there is that I feel like Boston.
So you think let me ask a different way. Do you think there's a 10? Do you think 10-1? Do you think it's better than 10% that Joel Embiid plays 2,500 minutes this year?
I think Boston's going to win at the bare minimum in the mid-40s, and I think that's a little bit lofty for the Sixers. So I think 10% is not bad. Like, if somebody's a Sixers optimist, that's not a terrible bet to make, especially because the payout is a lot higher than if you bet the over here. Yeah. So I would consider it. I would certainly consider it. But I think that the problem is that the Celtics don't have a low floor. So this isn't one of those circumstances which we see sometimes. And then also remember the Raptors. I think the Raptors have a much lower floor than they have in recent years. But they also are another one of those like steady regular season teams. So I don't think you're going to see both of them fall off and see the Sixers get up to like 48.
I think that if I was betting something on the Sixers, I would bet that division number, which is 10-1. Because I think it is better than 10-1 that you're going to hit. Like, so if one of Simmons and Fultz is a not superstar, a star, right? This first season, which is possible, and Embiid plays 2,500 minutes, then I think this team could win something like 47, 48 games. And there's things that can happen based, and we'll talk a little bit about the other teams in this division, where I think that could be enough to have the division be in play. Right, I think like you bet 10-1 on that, and you can be very, very happy in March, and you basically can like figure out a position to get out of that because they can be there. I do agree that it's a lot of improvement, but again, they have better talent on this team, significantly better talent and deeper talent. They have, let's say, they have NBA level talent at like basically. So you've got Redick, you've got Covington, you've got McConnell's been good, you've got Amir, who's, he won't play that many minutes, but when he does, Amir has really good numbers when he plays. He can't stay on the court, but he has good numbers when he plays. But, you've got Embiid if he's healthy. I mean, you're getting some pieces. Plus, you're getting whatever you get back when you trade Okafor. You're going to move Okafor at some point, right?
I don't think they're going to get an immediate contributor for him. My instinct is that they get more of a future asset in that way, just because I don't think a team's going to trade that. But so then the other thing we have to talk about with the Sixers is Rookie of the Year odds, because they have two different guys that are in serious consideration for this, and I mean, I could see strong opinions for it. The general assumption that I always use for Rookie of the Year is it's the guy who has the best counting stats.
Yeah, and it's not, I don't think I think those are sucker bets. I don't think either Simmons or Futz are going to have the best counting stats of any rookie. I don't think that's going to happen. They're just not going to get enough time, and this is going to be more of an Embiid's team. Like, here's the thing: if either Simmons,
I don't think it's about I don't think it's about playing time. I think it's about usage, because I think there are a lot of different high usage guys on this team, and so that's just going to lead to some variance for them. Whereas another guy like Lonzo or Dennis Smith, they're going to have the ball in their hands all the time.
We'll talk about Lonzo, but Lonzo's almost guaranteed to get an All-Star bid. Almost guaranteed, because he's the Lakers. So I mean, there's a thing about.
Well, that's different than Rookie of the Year, though. So.
Yeah, but I think he's like, there's going to be enough. Again, I don't think they're going to get enough counting stats, and I mean, unless Fultz is like ephemeris. But I have my doubts about Fultz being good immediately. I'm in the same place as you are, whereas I think he has flaws in his games that he still needs to figure out.
Well, and also with Simmons, like, I think that scoring is not near what he does best, and it's going to be hard for him. Like, that's an unusual Rookie of the Year case to make for a guy who's like, he's a good rebounder, he'll get assists and all that. Like, it's kind of a complete case. Yeah. And yeah, I think Simmons, if he had played last year, he could have won it going away. But this year, it's going to be a stronger group. I certainly think he can win it, but I wouldn't bet it at the numbers I'm seeing it at.
I'm looking at the top 5, and there's a name I like in there as like the guy who's going to be the dark horse. So there's the favorite and the dark horse, and the dark horse does not play for the Sixers. We'll get to him. Like there's one guy who's going to be the Mr. Highlight Reel, and who's going to like basically like I think that's the kid that's going to move some sneakers. But we'll talk about him in a bit.
It'll be interesting if we're thinking of the same guy, because I assume we are. But
I think we're thinking the same guy, and I think that's the guy you go like.
But so to clarify with the Sixers, I'm sorry, under in play. You're over. Are you over and stay away? But the division odds are better. That's what you'd rather play.
I'm over and fade, and I would think strongly about that thing. I would think about that 10-1 because I think it's interesting. Because I think
maybe what you do is you bet half the amount you were going to bet on the over, and just bet that on the division odds, so it's less of a risk, but it's still more of a payout.
I think the 10-1 should be fun, and I think as I said, I think the 10-1 is a number that you could be in a really good place to like basically like leverage out later in the season. Like if they like something happens, you can basically bet certain games for it. But as I said, I think the Knicks and the Nets are going to be bad enough that I think the Sixers are going to get a lot of freebies. There's a lot of freebies in the bottom of that East, right? And I think, as I said, if any one of these guys kind of like, so if Embiid plays more than 2,000 minutes, and either Fultz or Simmons is great, and they've already got Covington and JJ Redick and like Amir will give them something, and there's talent. I mean, this team. I mean, I think they can win half their games, right? And I think
they absolutely could. Like, I'm not knocking their ceiling on that. I think they're 1 year away. I think it's going to take Fultz and Simmons 1 year to really figure out the NBA. Embiid doing as well as he did after a year off was the anomaly. And then they'll be on pace to win. You know, I think it's very possible. Even so, I said they're going to go under. I'm comfortable in that they win a playoff series in 2018-19. Like, that's where I think this team is going. But I think this year is too early.
I was going to say that. I think that this team is going to be the team that you're not going to want to see at the first. Like, if you're 1 seed and this is the team you're getting as the 8th seed on the other side, because I think this team will get better as the season goes on. So if they're healthy and they're getting better, I would not want to see this team the first round of the playoffs across, because you're not going to get an easy out. Because they're young and they're going to get excited and they've got talent. So if it's the right matchup, you could be in for a really long series in the first round. And I think that's where I am. I think they definitely make the playoffs, right? We both think they make the playoffs.
I think they have a good shot at it. So the way I've phrased it is I think they're the 8th best team in the Eastern Conference, but that doesn't guarantee anything because there are just so many other teams in the mix. So I would say they have a less than 50% chance of making it in, but they're the 8th best team. So, you know, maybe like in the 40 to 45% range, something like that.
Yeah, this has been really interesting. I think it's because the lines are set really well, right? So if this number was at 38, where would you be?
Oof, it would definitely be stay away, but that's right around where I think it might be.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, like, and if it was like at 43, I'd be under. Yeah, like 40. Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about the Sixers. I mean, you and I could talk about the Sixers for an eon, but so let's move on to the Hornets, though. So the Hornets last year, to a point, they had a season from hell. Just a lot of disappointing things. Cody Zeller completely sabotaged their season because they had no backup centers because Roy Hibbert was garbage. So they won 36 games, got a little bit better, not a ton. I mean, Dwight should help. And their over-under set at 42.5. I really like the over here because I think they're just better than that number.
I think we always like the over on the. I think has there been a year where we haven't liked the over on the Hornets?
I think like 4 years ago. I think the first year one of the early years, it was like we were shaky on it, but still went on the over. But every other year we've been all over it.
Here's the thing: even if Dwight is only if Dwight is healthy, he's an upgrade over what they had that year, and they're a better team. They won 20. I mean, they won 36, and I think they're easily more than 6 wins. If Dwight plays a full season and is healthy, they're like in the 45-46 range. Even if Dwight doesn't, if Seller is healthy, that means it's a much better situation than they had last year. And you got Kemba, and you got like Batum, and you got guys on this team. So yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think, and they're well coached. I love the over on this team, and I'm definitely.
And also, so two other big things to consider. One is, if Kemba doesn't stay healthy, this team falls off a cliff. Like, we have to acknowledge that. Like, there is a way that this team goes under, and that is Kemba. But also, I think Charlotte benefits more than many teams with how bad the bottom is right now because their defense is so strong, and I think their offense is going to be competent, that I think they'll run a fair amount of the bad teams, and that will boost their number a little bit. And then they'll be feisty against the middle of the pack and all that kind of stuff.
Think about their top 6: Kemba, Batum, Howard, Seller, Kid Gilchrist, and Marvin Williams. That's solid. And then you got Jeremy Lamb.
And I mean, if this could be the year that Kaminsky's a little bit better, like he's been in the league a couple of years, if he can give them a solid 18 to 22 minutes a game, then that's a big depth piece. Malik Monk is intriguing if he can ever get healthy. Still a shot with Jeremy Lamb, their backup point guard. MCW's not great, but Ramon Sessions was awful.
As you said, I would prefer it wasn't MCW. I think if I'm them, if I'm Jordan, he already got him the center. Like, go look for a backup point guard that's better than that. I mean, I think that that would be the thing. If I'm like start looking for a guy who you can bring. But as I said, I mean, I think what's going to happen is if something did happen, there are guys out there. Remember we talked about Darren Collison. There are guys out there on bad teams that could come in and run the team if you needed to. If nothing happens to Kemba, and Kemba's going to be healthy, he's been healthy, then I think definitely this is a definite over. What do you think about the division odds?
Oof. So division odds is at 5 to 1.
Yeah, that's about right?
Yeah, that's not bad because Miami is inconsistent. So basically, if Charlotte wins, let's say 45 games or something in that range, how will that affect the teams around them? So Miami could win more than that. I'm not sure that they will. And Washington, I think they're better than that. I think their expected season is there. But remember, on 5 to 1 odds, you don't need everything to go right and everything to go wrong. 20% of the time. So I think that's okay. I like the over better than the division odds, but they're not bad.
Yeah, are we both overplay on Charlotte?
Yes, at least I am.
I think we're overplay. Are we? And I think again, I would think about the 5 to 1. Do we play the 5 to 1 or think about the 5 to 1?
I think about it. I don't play it at this point, but if it got up to 7 or 8, I would think about it a little harder.
I would say Arturo plays 5 to 1. I would play the 5 to 1. I think that's a good division odd. And then you would think about it. Danny would think about it at 7 to 1. Do you like any of the other odds for them?
No, I don't think they're going to be good enough to win the conference or the title or anything like that. I don't like those odds.
It's 80 to 1 to the conference. That is an interesting bet. That is a very interesting bet.
I don't think their offense is going to be good enough for them to run through everyone that's in front of them.
Basically, that 80 to 1 is do you think there's an 80 to 1? You get a throwback season from Dwight, right? And the Cleveland situation falls apart, which I think that's a more interesting. Although I think Cleveland's a more interesting team now. No, I don't like that. I don't like that 80 to 1. Not quite there. I think here's the thing. Charlotte might be a team where I monitor their conference odds, and I monitor their conference odds during the season, because I think if they get into say 100 to 1, it's there's situations where that could be interesting depending on what we see on the court for them. Right now, I don't like it.
I just don't see it with them. I don't see that point. The ceiling isn't there for me for them to really win that, because they'd have to beat at least 2 teams that are better than they are. But
would you pick the Hornets or the Bucks in a playoff series?
Right now, I'd probably pick the Bucks, but I could absolutely see if the Hornets play as well as they could, I could see that being different at the end of the year. But Milwaukee, we have to see where they are, and assuming that they get Jabari back by that point, I think they'll be better at the end of the year than they are at the beginning.
Okay,
I think Charlotte's going to have to run it up early, and that doesn't affect you in a playoff series because you play all those games in April.
So we got the Heat coming up. the Miami Heat. 43.5.
Yeah, the Heat are a challenge because, so I think that there are some. So the way I said this when Nate and I did over-unders was, I bet some people are thinking of this as a no-brainer over just because of how well they ended the year. I do not think that at all. I'm leaning over, but this is an over fade for me because I can see them being worse than this because, winning 43 games is still kind of a lot for a team that isn't amazing. That's good, and their defense will be strong again, but I don't love this team.
What do you think of Justice Winslow, who at one point, the Heat fans would not have traded for Melo? What do you think of Winslow?
I'm not a believer necessarily in him, but what I like about Miami is that they have a lot of other options. If Justice isn't working out, they can try Josh Richardson, they could try James Johnson, they can try Waiters and play Tyler Johnson. They can do a bunch of different things. And I think Spoelstra is a good enough coach to figure this out. I think they're a team that's going to take a lot of work to get right, but unlike some of these other ones, let's say Indiana, if you gave Nate McMillan this roster, it'd be oh, they're going to be a disaster. But Spo, I think he can get it.
I'm on the same place with you. I'm over, and I am a fade because I don't trust it because this team has some players that are not good, right? In a vacuum, but I mean, when your third best guy is what? Karate? Dion Waiters? Is it James Johnson? Is it Dion Waiters? Who is it?
I don't know who it is.
It's it's Whiteside and Dragic and Tyler Johnson, Dion Waiters, James Johnson. I mean, And
I think it's gonna. I think the third best thing on their team, but it might even be their first or second, is their system and just the idea that they'll figure out how to maximize it. And another big challenge that they're going to have to deal with, which very few teams do, is what happened last year was they got hit by a bunch of injuries, including to Justice Winslow, and they had guys that needed to step up, and they really did. And it looks like they're probably going to start the year healthy or close to it. So that means there isn't really enough food for all their mouths to feed. So how are they going to handle that? If I don't know, I don't even know who's going to lose out. Is it going to be James Johnson? Is it going to be Dion Waiters? Where are they going to go with this? How are those players going to handle it? And how long is that going to go? I think they'll be okay, but that is a downside risk that I think we have to discuss and acknowledge.
Is Dwayne Wade on the Heat in February?
No, he's going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean,
he'll go to a title contender like Cleveland or something like that.
Right. It's been talked about, but yeah, I don't think that happens. Again,
maybe he goes there in a year or two, but I don't think he finishes this season there. I mean, if he gets bought out, he's going to go somewhere that he can compete for a championship again. That's not Miami.
This is, as I said, this is a weird team, and it's a weird matchup team. As again, I like the over, and there are situations where this is a good team, but I keep worrying about the fact that I'm looking at this roster and going in a playoff series, what would I do? Who am I picking this team in a playoff series against? And I don't know that I Last year, I probably would have picked him against Cleveland. I still stand by that because of the particular matchup on size and rebounding. But, I don't know that I trust Dion Waiters to continue to be good, right? It might have been, last year might have been his best year ever. And I don't know, Justice Winslow has not been good. So I don't know what you're going to get from him this year. So it's a bit of a mess. I think they're a good team, but to ask the question, who do you think has a better record, them or the Hornets at the end of the year?
I would lean towards the Hornets, but I don't feel strongly about it. It's probably close to 50-50 for me.
Yeah, I like the Hornets at 5-1 to win that division. I don't like the Heat at 3-5, 3.5 to 1 to win it. I think it's hard for me to see Miami winning 50 games. I think that's going to be really hard for them. They could, and their defense was special for stretches of last year. And, Dragic, if he plays like he did at certain moments in this, it certainly could be competitive. But if, exactly. So, I don't love it. And also, the difference from 5 to 3.5 is significant here, too. Yeah, and you have a bunch of guys on this team that get hurt, right? So it's Whiteside gets hurt, Dragic has gotten hurt.
And they don't have a lot of high ceiling guys. They have players that are good. They have a lot of players that I like. But when you see a team make the kind of jump that they would need to win a division, you're basically saying somebody's going to make a big leap individually, Giannis did. We're going to talk about the Bucks soon enough. I don't think they have that guy.
I think Whiteside is a guy who would be overqualified to be the third best guy on the championship team. But as the guy on a team, that kind of limits your upside because he's not... his game is limited, so you're kind of relying on Dragic a little more, and as much as I like Whiteside, and I think they had to pay him, I don't know that, could you see Whiteside being the second best guy on the championship team?
No.
Yeah, I'm the same place. Like I think they're they got two guys who are like really overqualified to be third bananas in Dragic and Whiteside, but I don't know that they're that they have. You're saying they don't have that high ceiling, right? They're not. Whiteside might be. Whiteside can be the second best guy in the playoff series, or like the best guy in the playoff series. I think in a particular right matchup.
Yeah, for a small sample, like a couple games, sure, certainly.
Right, because he can bring it, but like he's a little more inconsistent. So yeah, I mean, I agree. Like I like the Hornets ceiling better than I like this team. I don't like either one to like the conference odds are a bit too rich right now for me for both these teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's move on to the Milwaukee Bucks. Fascinating team, won 42 last year. Giannis took a gigantic leap, is now, an all-NBA guy, could potentially be an MVP candidate down the road. Vegas set their line at 47.5, and I just think this is way too high. I just think it's way too high a number.
Is this team better or worse than they were last season?
Well, so I think that the big swap that they're going to do, assuming he stays healthy, is that they had Jabari for, basically Jabari and Chris Middleton were trains passing in the night. And I think Chris Middleton is a better player right now than Jabari Parker was last year. I like Jabari, but I just think that Middleton's better. And also I think that he fits their team better because now they might actually play Giannis at the 4 sometimes, which I think is his best position defensively, and that can space the 4 a little bit. So I think that in those sorts of ways they're better, but they're not a ton better unless their young guys take a big step. Like if Thon Maker takes a big step, or Malcolm Brogdon, which I don't really see him as a big step kind of guy, or even Tony Snell. So I think they're better, but I don't think they're much better.
You know who this team reminds me of a little bit? Reminds me of that 2007 Cavs team a little bit, where like you have the Ferrari parked there. Giannis is clearly he's the best player on the team. He might be close to being the best player in the conference, but who's the second best player on this team? Brogdon? Is Brogdon the second best player on this team?
I think it's Middleton, probably. Because remember, he was hurt towards the end of last year. He wasn't all the way back, and I think that he can be that guy. But your point is well-founded, which is the idea that they don't have any other guys that can really like take over until Jabari gets back. Because he can do that for stretches. They have a lot of good like functional pieces, but they don't have those guys, and those players are incredibly important in the regular season because when everybody else has a flat night, you can do that. So I think they're depending too much on Giannis. And I mean, they absolutely can get this number. Like, I'm not saying this is a 0% one, but I'm playing the under because I think it's a low probability.
I think what Vegas is kind of counting on, that like this is kind of a terrible East and terrible bottom. They're going to be a bunch of teams that are tanking. Giannis might be the best player in the conference, and even though this isn't a great team, as I said, that 06-07 Cavs team won 50 games, right? And again, it was a terrible conference, and the West was really better. So I mean, I think that number is probably about right for a team that's going to be trying and is going to have the best player on the floor, probably like 98% of the games that they play. So I think it's high. So I mean, I would be 47.5 is such a high number. Is adding Middleton? Well,
so here's something I'll say. I'm guessing you would rather play the division odds than the over/under.
Probably. I think the thing is, it's 47.5. So I think they're going to win something like, I think that they're about 4 games, maybe 5 games better than they were last year based on the talent. Although they moved around. I think Brogdon's good and Giannis. So like, I think 46 would be my number if I was picking out of thin air, right? So I would probably go under and I would fade it is what I would go with this team.
I'll go under and play it. I think they could go past this, but I don't expect it. I think it's like 60-40 or something in that range.
And that it's 8-1 to win the division, right? So 8-1, what are you betting on? You're betting on basically LeBron demanding a trade. That's what you're betting on.
Well, no, I don't even think it's that. I think if Cleveland could win 48, 49 games, and you're betting on Milwaukee following that LeBron lead and winning 50. I think 50 games could win this division. Could. I don't think it will, but it could.
I'm going to agree with you. I think 8-1 is fair. I like 8-1. I think 8-1 is fair. Now, actually, here's an interesting question. What do you think about their 22-1 odds to win the conference?
I think that's a little bit too rich, but it's not too far off.
You're betting on Giannis Antetokounmpo being the best player in basketball next year, basically, in like any playoff series.
Or not even the best player in basketball, the best player in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah,
I mean, because look at the other teams they're facing. I mean, Boston, Toronto, all that. Like, really, the team they have to get past pretty clearly is Cleveland.
And I've watched a lot of those games, and those. What the secret on those games, Milwaukee, Cleveland, is that Giannis is the best player on the court, and it pisses LeBron off to no end. And like I've watched those games, and Giannis is the best player, right? So it's a really interesting dichotomy, which is I think Giannis wouldn't see it better. Well, like I mean when he has to like maybe guard Kevin Durant in the finals or Kawhi. So I mean I think that I like 8-1. I think I kind of like 22-1 a little bit. Because I think that like they should have beaten Toronto. I thought it was a weird, but I mean if this team is healthy,
oh yeah, they should have.
I like the 8-1 to win the division, and I'm tempted by 22-1 to win the conference for them, right? Because I think that there's definitely a better than 22-1 chance that like Giannis is just the best player in the playoffs, and if you have the best player on the court, then your odds of winning a not great conference are pretty good.
Here's what I'll say. So I think I said under and play it, and I would. If you are an optimist on this Bucks team, I think both the conference bet and the division bet are better uses of your money because of the higher payouts than the overrun.
I also think they can win 47 games and win the conference. Like they can win 47 games and win the conference.
Sure.
Because
I mean we already saw we've seen teams not without the best record in the East win the conference the last 2 years. Like it has, or 2 of the last 3, I think.
Because I mean like what I'm saying is like I think there's a world there, like I think there's a better than 8-1 chance that this team wins 50 games and it's there in the conference. And I think the reason is because again Giannis could be the best player. I think Brogdon develops a little more than if you've got those 2 of your best guys and Middleton's back and their depth is not great, but when you get into playoff series, it's the top 6 that matter. And who's the top 6 for this team?
So it's Giannis, Brogdon, Thon, Middleton, probably Tony Snell and Jabari.
Giannis, Middleton, Monroe.
Monroe's probably in that too. Yeah.
Brogdon, Delly? No, we're not counting Delly. I mean,
no.
I mean, I think this team is interesting. I think the best bets for this team are the 8-1 division and maybe let's talk a little bit MVP.
Well, so the other thing that I want to mention with them is the series in the Eastern Conference that I want to see most is actually Celtics Bucks.
Yes.
Because that just the strengths and weaknesses of those teams, the idea of the Bucks being on the ascendancy, like if that's it could be the 2-3. It could be the 1-4. That's
possibly your conference matchup for the next 4 or 5 years, right? That might
certainly could be, and so I think that unless the Sixers get into it and a couple other teams, but yeah, that's the one I want. I mean, Cleveland, Milwaukee would be great. Giannis. Well, so here's the other thing. The other one, the reason that you would want Cleveland, Milwaukee is that if this is LeBron's last year in the Eastern Conference for a little while, you want Giannis LeBron before that happens, before he leaves.
You're gonna. So, I would say you're gonna. I mean, I kind of think that you're going to get Bucks Wiz in the first round. I think that's fate. I think that's the one you're gonna see.
I think it's possible. It's certainly possible. You're thinking of that as the 4-5.
Yeah, I think either that or the Raptors. I think. I mean, again, So, actually, before we get on to that, like, Giannis 11-1 for MVP. What do you think?
Oof, 11-1. So I like that, but I don't think it's the best use of money that I have.
Wow, but isn't he just going to have all the counting stats though? And
but he's not a great shooter. Like I don't think of him as really a volume scorer. It's more like the Ben Simmons Ben Simmons Rookie of the Year case. So I think that it's like if you're a Giannis optimist, you could. I would never blame you for putting some money on that. But I would look towards the guys more like Harden, and I'll save my number 1 MVP pick for later. But the guys who are going to put up a lot of points too. Like I think Giannis will do really well, and there's a chance even that he's like the best or second best player in the league. But I don't think he's going to be sexy enough to win MVP.
Would you rather spend if you have $100? Would you rather have a ticket that says 100-1, 11-1 on Giannis for MVP, or 22-1 for the Bucks to win the conference?
Ooh, Oh,
Tough, right?
I think I'd go with Giannis just because I can see that case a little bit more clearly. And for the Bucks to beat the Cavs, it's like they need a lot of things to go right. And because I mean, if the Cavs hadn't made the Isaiah trade, I think I would have probably gone. I might have gone the other way. But now they're a little bit deeper, and that depth is specifically useful against the Bucks, having Jay Crowder to defend Giannis more.
Yeah, I think that in that 22-1, I'm gonna put 11-1 for Giannis MVP is intriguing. The 22-1 for the division is also interesting. For conference is also interesting. I would say that what if the conference odds were at 30-1?
I'd probably go that way then. 30-1, that's a pretty solid payout. But then it's a pretty close call. It's still a close call. But
yeah. I mean, I think we both like the 8-1. We both like 8-1. We both think the other two are interesting, but the numbers.
I don't like 8-1 like I would bet it, but I'm intrigued by it. And if you were higher on the Bucks than I am, then I would say that's a better use of your money than the over/under.
What odds would you put on them winning 50 games?
50. I'd say that's like maybe 25-30%, something like that.
52.
Then we're talking more in 15 to 20 range. That's a lot of wins.
Yeah,
that's like what Cleveland.
In essence, yeah, you're kind of assuming things go a little south in Cleveland, which I totally could see because I think LeBron's gone, right? But we'll talk.
Well, they could also go south in Cleveland just because Cleveland doesn't care about their regular season record. Like they're not going to be competing with the Warriors for the best record in the NBA, so they're going to be going at it. They're going to be going at that as the road seed, and then in the East, I don't think they care. You know, they could be this. They could do what Houston did, and they could be like the 6, and they could. I think they would still think they're the favorites to win the East.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit. Their title odds are basically going off on average about 1.5% for the Bucks, which I think is high. That's high. That feels high to me.
That's high.
Yeah.
I mean, they would need so much to go right, and I mean, the Western Conference. I mean. Think about how good would they have to be to beat the Warriors in a sim?
As I said, it would probably involve the meteor strike.
Or the Rockets. The Rockets are a really good team.
It would involve the meteor strike at like some place where the Western All-Stars are having a practice, I think. Because
I think 1.5 is too strong for that. Yeah, as much as I think they do have a high ceiling, 1.5 is I would go more in the 1 or even 0.5% range.
Yeah, because
Miami having a 1% title odds, those are way too high too.
Yeah, no, it's. Yeah,
but I think we kind of know where we are with the Bucks. But before we move on, I want to take a quick moment to tell you about FanDuel. I have been a fantasy football player and basketball and baseball to varying degrees for a long time now, and this is the first year that I've moved completely away from year-long fantasy and moved into more daily, and I've really enjoyed it through the first 2 weeks of the NFL season through FanDuel, and they have a variety of competitions for basically different levels of experience, especially for people like me who are new to it, which I've really enjoyed. And so I think I'm going to make the jump from free competitions to low money competitions. I'm still conservative with my money at this point and still learning the ropes, but probably going to make that jump. And what's really nice about that is that they have more like beginners groups. And so it's how many competitions you've been in before. And I love the flexibility of it. So you can choose different time frames for the games that you want. So if you're going to be only around for a certain point and you want to have something to root for, you can certainly do that. Or if you want to do more the whole weekend of games, you can absolutely go in that direction too. And the idea that you're not wedded to your players for the entire season. I mean, you see these year-long injuries or multiple weeks with a guy that you know is really good, and instead of it being something that just drags down your season and you're playing the waiver wire, you make new decisions each time. And I've really enjoyed that part of it. And the idea that, you know, you don't have to worry if the guy that you like most was drafted number 1 overall and the randomizer gave you the 12th pick. If you want that guy, you think it's going to be a great week for them, they can be on your team. It's just that you have to balance out the quote-unquote salaries differently, because that's how they do it. They assign each guy a value, and then you have a total sum that you can do, and that amount changes by your league. So I have really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. If you want to try it out for yourself, you can go to FanDuel.com, then you click the Join Now button, and then there's a promo code for RealGM, which is the way that you not only tell them that it came from us, but it gives you an entry into a free contest, and you can play for a share of $10,000, which is pretty awesome. So again, that is FanDuel.com, and then the Join Now button, and then the promo code RealGM. Void where prohibited. Do you ready to move on to the Wizards?
Yes, I am. I'm ready to move on to the Wizards.
So the Wizards are tough because their line is set at 47.5 or 48.5. They won 49 last year, but their top guys were really, really healthy last year. And so that's a big concern.
Do you think this team is better this year than it was last year?
So if we're talking purely from a talent perspective, I think they're better, but I don't think they're going to be as healthy as they were. Last year, Wall, Beal, Porter, Morris, and Gortat all played 76 or more games. I just don't think that's going to happen again.
Who do you think has a better record, them or the Bucks?
I think the Wizards will, but not by that much. I think the Wizards to me just have a higher floor because of Wall and Beal, like those guys, and I mean their team system, and I think the Wizards are more stable, and stability is a good thing.
I mean, don't we think they're going to be helped by the fact that the rest of the East is kind of terrible?
Oh, certainly, both these teams will be. But I think Washington, their game-to-game variance is less, and I think that so they'll win more of those. They won't have as many surprising losses as Milwaukee will.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, so the schedule, like, so as I said, like the better teams are going to win more games, I think, slightly this year because of the schedule. There are going to be a bunch of terrible teams at the bottom of the East. Particularly, it's like, so who's the rest of, like, well, I mean, even though the division is rough, because, like, they play in the Southeast, and the Southeast is, Orlando's not great, but they've got, like, Charlotte and Miami and them, so it's not, well, and Atlanta was going to be terrible. So I feel like the over on 47.5 is, I agree with you on the health point. I don't want any part of this bet, to say.
Yeah, it's pretty clearly underfade for me.
Yeah, I'm thinking because I'm really like in my brain I'm like 47, and it's underfade. But like I could totally because I if teams start tanking, I could totally just see them just picking up like easy wins across the board. Right? Do we like their division odds?
So they're at about even, 1-to-1, pretty much.
A little lower than 1-to-1. You get less money back if you bet them to win the division.
I think it's okay, but I think that if you're at that point, there are better bets on the board. You know, that's the way I'd put it. It's not terrible.
14-1 to win the conference. What do you think?
Oof,
that's interesting.
That's more interesting because when you're getting into the Wizards, and this is kind of the same idea with the Bucks, is that. Yeah, there aren't as many hurdles, you know, as there. I mean, I think that the top of the East is going to, you know, all those teams like we talked about. Maybe they'll play Milwaukee in the first round. So I would probably, I wouldn't touch that.
The Wizards have the top guys. They don't have the structural flaws that Toronto has in a playoff series, or the Celtics used to have, which is like you can't body the hell out of their lead guard and not get killed, because like if you try that with Walt, it won't work that well. And then you've also got Beal to kind of pick up the slack on shooting on the other side, and they've got other guys that can actually put the ball in the hole. So, like, they've actually been... I've actually thought that they could have possibly made a finals before, like, the year that Wall got hurt. And, like, they've been kind of there. So I think that, like, 14-1 on the Wizards making it isn't... I mean, I think it's a lot more likely than that 14-1 number. I mean, what do you think?
I don't think it's a lot more likely, but I think that's a reasonable number. So if you're a little higher on the Wizards than I am, because I just think Cleveland's still better than there. Now, if Cleveland falls off for whatever reason,
who's covering Wall in that series?
Like they still don't have a guy to defend elite small forwards. Like they don't have that guy. Otto Porter is overrated as a defender. Guess what?
If you have a series with the Wizards and the Cavs, who's covering John Wall?
Yeah, I mean that's going to be a big problem. It's probably going to be it might be it might be IT, but basically what you're saying is that John Wall is not so good as a scorer that he will beat you that way. If you hold on everyone else, you know, it's kind of one of those series. So it's sort of like what teams used to do a little bit with LeBron back in the day.
So it comes down to Jay Crowder and Otto Porter, basically, if that's a series.
Well, I think it comes down to Otto Porter on LeBron. I think LeBron would just run through the Wizards like tissue paper, and that's a big problem. And there is and LeBron, the big difference between LeBron and John Wall is that LeBron as a scorer can generate fouls, he can get guys out of the game, he can get to the free throw line, and John Wall, like, he'll get to that mid-range shot and he'll shoot it, and some nights it'll go in and some nights it won't. So like I think that there is a way that the Wizards could win that series, but I wouldn't expect it. But this is the point, broader point I was making with them, is that they don't have the right guy to defend elite small forwards offensively.
Yes.
Boston, Cleveland, and Milwaukee all have elite offensive small forwards at this point. I mean, Gordon Hayward, I'm not the biggest fan of in the world, but they don't have a guy to defend any of those players. And they're going to face probably two of those three if they want to make the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I'm kind of like, as I said, I'm looking at them like, I think that the teams around them got slightly better, and they're the same, and I agree with you, they had a lot of luck with health last year, and I'm kind of with you on the under, and I don't As much as I mean, I might hear.
Yeah, but there's no reason to bet it because there are other things on the board that are more reasonable.
I would anybody who's thinking about that 14-1 bet, it's like just wait, because I could see myself betting on the Wizards making the finals come playoff time, and I think you might get better odds then. So right now, I agree. I wouldn't touch it. I think
it's a little rosy, and you see that when, generally speaking, I think those track pretty well. That if their over under is a little strong, that their conference odds are a little strong, and so I think that if you wager that down. But let's move on to the Raptors.
Do we think John Wall has a chance at the MVP?
I was looking at that because the number right now for him is it's like about 28 or 25 to 1. I don't think that he's going to put up the overall stat line. Like, you think about that Chris Paul never won an MVP, and then think about the guys that are in front of him that are going to put up counting stats, and that we both don't think the Wizards are going to be like the best or the second best team in the Eastern Conference. So I don't think he has a great case.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
It's possible. I mean, at that, you could throw like $5-10 on it if you really liked it, that sort of thing. But I don't think it's one of the best bets at all.
Yeah, we don't like any of the bets on the board for the Wizards, I don't think. Yeah.
No.
Okay, let's move on.
No, and that's fine. Toronto Raptors. Raptors won 51 games last year. The line is set at 48.5. The biggest thing that they lost was actually a bunch of their depth, because Patrick Patterson went to the Thunder. They lost Corey Joseph to the Pacers. And they didn't really replace them in a way that you'd expect. They got CJ Miles, and they're going to rely a lot on their young guys. So I think there's a very real chance that basically, Lowry missed a bunch of time last year, that they do go over. But again, this seems a little bit rosy to me. So I'm going to go under, but stay away.
So Lowry's the best player, and then here's the thing. This is a team that's flawed, but it's more flawed in the playoffs. It's not flawed in the season.
Right. Because and DeRozan in that way is sometimes underrated by kind of the hive mind that is like the kind of like nerdy basketball Twitter, if you want to call it that, because he is intensely overrated by casuals and certain people in the playoffs. But as a regular season player, he's still very valuable, and he was a big part of their. They won 51 games last year, despite I think Lowry missed 22.
Do you really?
So
do you really,
he was a big part of that.
You realize I am the captain of the hive that's anti-DeRozan, right? You understand that, Danny, right?
Yeah, I do.
So here's the thing: the problem with DeRozan, while a skilled basketball player, there is the fact that I believe he's played 8 seasons in Toronto, and of those 8 seasons, only once has Toronto been better with him on the floor. And this is like delta on-off splits. And the reason being is the style that he plays is a style that isn't fit to the modern NBA. It's more fit to the NBA in the 80s or the 70s, because he takes shots that are not valuable. The defenses can slough off him. The guys around him that shoot better. There's problems. And these problems are aggravated once you get in the playoffs, because in the playoffs, you can play a more physical style of defense, you can take the other players out, and then basically just let him do whatever he wants, and it doesn't work because his game doesn't really work in the playoffs. While he's okay, I think part of the problem is he's been trained to play the game in a way that doesn't work in the modern style. He's like the anti-Harden, where Harden basically, or Manu, just Manu or Harden just take shots that are high value and high efficiency and just help you across the board. DeMar doesn't do that. DeMar does the stuff that you used to teach to play the game 20 or 30 years ago. And again, with the change in the zone defense, the way the threes work, his game just kind of hurts you a little more than it helps. Again, this doesn't mean he's not a skilled basketball player. I just think his style doesn't quite work. It works better in the regular season.
He's also awful defensively, which is worth mentioning too.
Yeah, so he's inefficient and awful defensively. It doesn't create space or doesn't have enough gravity to do that. And smart defenses can just go, hey, knock yourself out and shoot, right? And so they can negate him, particularly when you can play a physical style of defense. But that said, I think we're both on the over. I'm slightly on this team. I think this team is.
No, I'm under fade actually.
You're under fade?
Just because I'm under fade. I think it's a close play, but I think they need to stay really healthy because they're top heavy now, more than they were before. So that their depth is going to become more of an issue.
I'm over fade, but I love the division odds.
Their division odds are ridiculous. I mean, so basically it's 6.5.
Is it the best bet?
Is it 1?
Is it the best bet we've seen on the board so far? I think it's the best.
It's up there. It's really, really up there because
bet that we've seen so far. What is better than 6-5 on the Raptors to win that division so far that we've seen? I don't think we've seen anything.
Yeah, I mean, because that's true. Even though I'm optimistic on the Pistons over and maybe and the Bucks and all that. Yeah, I think you could certainly make a reasonable case because Boston could be very good, but they might not necessarily be. And
we will talk about Boston Hornets.
We will. But here's the other thing to remember: that's the only team in front of them, unless the Sixers blow through expectations. It's like the Sixers, because I think we both agree, whether you're on the over or the under here, that Toronto can win 45 to 54 games. Pretty, like, there's a clear path. You're not going to argue it too hard if they're somewhere in that range. The odds on that, where's Boston going to end up?
The odds on that are so good that I'm actually checking to make sure this is not one of those situations where we misread them. No, I'm seeing them at 6 and 6.5 is what I'm seeing Toronto win division. I would literally I would get on a plane to bet this in Vegas. I think this is because the Raptors.
That's a really good number. Like, I was thinking, like, if you had told me this in the abstract, to put that at about 3. Like, that's where I would put it. So you're getting more than double the payout.
I would to win the division. I would have put that at 2. Really? I mean, 3? I would put it at 2. I mean, we'll talk about Boston's flaws, but I mean, I think this team, who else is winning this division? And Toronto isn't. Toronto was hurt last year. They won 51 games and they were hurt. This is a better team than they were last year. They'll get a full year of Ibaka, who might be older than he says, but
yeah, that bet is way better. Yeah, I would throw some money on that. That's a really, really good. I mean, 6.5. Like the payout on that is appalling.
Yeah, it's that's easily so far, and we'll talk a little bit further as we go along, but I don't know that I've seen another bet on the board that's as good. I mean, I don't think we like anything else.
And there are no MVP odds that I would like for them. So and I don't like their conference odds. I do not think they're going to win the Eastern Conference.
You couldn't pay me to bet them to win the conference. You could not pay me money, because here's the thing. As I mentioned before, the problem with this team is, in a playoff series, all you have to do is body the hell out of Kyle Lowry, and they have nothing else. If you physically
and put somebody who's bigger and stronger than DeRozan on him, and almost every single team in the Eastern Conference has somebody to defend DeMar DeRozan at this point.
You can basically know what you do. No, what you do is you lock down. You basically physically attack Lowry, and you let DeRozan basically do whatever he wants and just cut off his angle.
No, you can shut DeRozan down. Paul George did it.
Just shut down the zone and basically
Middleton did a nice job.
Collapse on all the shooters. Let him take mid-range. Knock yourself out.
You can do that too.
All the mid-range.
Either way.
And if that happens, the Celtics are killing them. The Bucks are killing them. The Heat,
Cavs, the Wizards,
the Cavs might kill. If it's the Heat might kill them too. Because Poe is smart enough to actually do that. Right.
Here's another interesting play. If Toronto exceeded expectations a little bit, I could see them losing a 1-8 series. Yeah, absolutely.
If it's Toronto and Philadelphia, I would be really interested in that. If it's Toronto and Philadelphia,
even if it's Charlotte, I could see them losing to Charlotte.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think Charlotte's the 8th seed. I think
Miami. I could see them losing to Miami.
It could it would be the Pistons, the Sixers, or the Heat, probably. Right?
Maybe Charlotte could be. I mean, you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I would, if Toronto's the 1 seed, I would really think about it depending on the matchup. Who's guarding them and what's happening, and how good is the coach defensively.
I think they're going to be more like the 3-6 or the 4-5, and I'll bet hard against them, and I'll probably be happy.
But again, we think that 6.5 to 1 for them to win the division is insulting. And
that's a wonderful line. I hadn't seen that before we recorded, and that's really good.
That's insulting. Yes, I mean, I think that's just public. That's just public money on the Celtics, which isn't smart. Public money isn't smart money. The Sharps have not gotten to this because the Sharps would bet this down to 3. Big money.
Yeah, so if you can see this, I might even try to figure out a way to put something on it. Okay, move on to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cavs, the team has won the Eastern Conference the last 3 years, won 51 last year, then won the Eastern Conference. The over-under is set at 53.5. They are a talented team. I do think that adding Jay Crowder, but 2 things are big here. 1, Isaiah Thomas potentially missing time, them being patient with him, all that, and them just not caring about winning a bunch of games in the regular season. I feel pretty confident in this under. This is an underplay for me, even though I think Cleveland's going to win the East.
Let me ask a question. How many times have the Cavaliers, with LeBron Part 2, won over 53 games?
You mean in their current run with LeBron or ever?
The current run with LeBron.
I think once.
So
didn't they win 54 once?
Yes. So basically, they have not. So let's go season by season here. So LeBron came back in 14-15. They won 53.
It was 14-15, 14-15, 15-16, 16-17.
So they won 53 games. The next season after that, they won 57. The next season after that, which is last season, they won 51, I believe.
51.
Yeah, they won 51 last season. So they've only won it once. And last year they were playing hard as hell, like hard. They were going hard trying to win this. All the models have it as under. They have them at 50. So a couple things to consider for this Cleveland team is, so they traded out for Isaiah because Kyrie wasn't staying. Kyrie was leaving. And LeBron's getting up there. Their depth is kind of questionable. And I mean, it's a little better with Jay. I think Jay actually kind of helps them. If they have Jay, I'd be like, I'd be laughing at this under. I'd be like under, and like I'd be laughing. It's insulting. My worry with them would be that they trade Love for pieces, and that improves their depth. But then it like takes out like their ceiling. And then I don't know how many games LeBron's going to play. I mean, I'm kind of like laying out like, think about like, so this is year 4, right? Of this run, and just the comparison, I believe year 4 for the Celtics, they won like 47 or 48 of the big 3. So I think that this is I think we won this bet last year. We went under and we won this bet, and I believe this is under and play. I mean, this is
yeah, same here.
Because I mean, again, 53.5. I mean, I wish it was like I wish I had an extra point, but I think 53.5. Like, given who this team is, given what the depth is. You have to think about it. Like, as I said, so opening game of the season, they're playing the Celtics. Who's guarding Kyrie?
I mean, probably Isaiah, and they'll just deal with it being bad.
Really? And then like Isaiah and Derrick Rose, or Calderon, or like who's covering guards on this team?
I mean, JR, and because remember, Shumpert was bad most of last year, so it's not like they have a lot of other options there. They have forward depth, and they have lots of things they can do there.
Think about it, like, so one of the things, like, for like people who are listening about stats, so here's one thing that happens with like these stats that happen out there. So context on these stats happens as follows. When you have somebody who's a really high usage offensive player who's terrible defensively, the guy playing next to him regularly, his numbers are generally going to be deflated because what happens on defense is they switch. So the man on the Shumpert's getting the hardest matchup on the floor every time that he's on the floor with Kyrie. And actually, here's the thing: that's not going to get better with like Isaiah Thomas.
No,
that's going to get worse. So like again, like here's your depth of the guards. It's Isaiah Thomas, Shumpert, Calderon, Derrick Rose, general sort of.
JR.
Well, I mean, yeah, and then like. I mean, my thing on this team is, like, I think somebody might lay a 50 burger on them. Like, some guard's going to lay a 50 burger at some point. I don't know how much games...
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know how many... Like, so LeBron might play... Does he play 2,400 minutes? He shouldn't play the level of minutes he's been playing recently, right? And I think...
No, and he's been playing way too many minutes a game. That's been the big issue for him.
So the other issue with this team is, like... All the scuttlebutt I hear is like the relationship between LeBron and Dan Gilbert is broken. LeBron's come out publicly and said some things that like lead me to believe he is not re-signing with the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? Like go look at what he said, like, and look at the relationships like Gilbert has, and this is kind of broken. So I think this is the end. I think LeBron is not going to do anything to put his next contract at risk. So I think he plays a lot less minutes. I think Love might be gone in terms of like they might move him because they don't want his long-term asset. How many Cavs currently on the roster should be buying houses and not renting houses in Cleveland?
None.
I think Jay Crowder. I think
because if LeBron leaves, then Jay Crowder becomes a trade asset.
No, but Jay Crowder is so cheap they got to keep somebody. I mean, I think Crowder,
no, I don't think they do. I think I think Jay Crowder is still more valuable to somebody else who's competitive, and he's cheap enough that you could actually get something.
Tristan? No.
Yeah, he's probably the closest. Like I think Tristan is probably the guy that I would be most open to saying you could buy, but I still wouldn't tell him to.
So here's a question for you. Do you think that who won the Celtics and Cavaliers trade in your mind? I have a theory.
The Cavs won it by a mile.
I disagree with that, and here's why. Because functionally, the Celtics traded like half a season of Isaiah. And they weren't resigning Isaiah, so there was no way they were going to re-sign him. There was no way they were going to pay him. And they're trading a guy who's under 6 feet tall, who's like 31. Who I don't know how good he's going to be going for coming off of like a significant injury. So that's the first thing. Like Jay Crowder was definitely an asset, and then Zizic was the other guy that threw in that trade. So yeah, they're trading a guy who's a serviceable starter and a really good contract for a guy who's never had a great coach. He's never had a really good coach in his career. He's had terrible coaches. Who's young, who's likely going to be an all-star for the next, 7 to 8 years on them. So I think they traded kind of things that they didn't need or didn't have for like a really young star that they're going to get for like a really long time. And again, we know Kyrie can play defense when he's engaged, and I think as I said, he's never had as good of a coach as he's going to have in Brad Stevens. So I'm kind of saying that they traded for an all-star guard, for kind of assets. The best asset they traded was Jay Crowder, right? Because again, I don't think the Celtics were not resigning Isaiah Thomas, and the Cavs, I would bet all the money that the Cavs are just not resigning Isaiah Thomas. You think the Cavs are resigning Isaiah Thomas?
No, I don't think they are. So here's the way that I would phrase the trade. So
and the Brooklyn pick, I think the Brooklyn pick is gonna wind up being like a 6 or 7.
Well, and I think that's part of the difference between the two of us, is that I think Brooklyn's going to be a little bit worse. Let's put the odds that LeBron leaves at 75%. I think you and I would both have it a little higher than that. But let's put it at 70.
I put it at 98%, but keep going.
But so let's just say it's at 75%. So Kyrie is under contract for the following year, and then he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. It sounds like he was going to leave basically kind of no matter what happened. Mm-hmm. He also wouldn't have provided much value for them, other than in a trade, theoretically, for that second year. And then you're trading him as an expiring contract. So you have that as the element. So I think what you're saying is basically Isaiah Thomas was less valuable than other people think. And so it's I think the Brooklyn pick is there. And also with Jay Crowder, I think he helps them a lot this year because he's, Cleveland, it's still going to be a hard press for them to beat the Warriors or whoever else. But at least Jay Crowder makes that low chance higher, and I think he makes that low chance higher by a meaningful degree because he can guard a lot of those players. He doesn't hurt you offensively, all that sort of stuff.
Let's look at these teams' track record. What are the Celtics and the Cavs getting with a 5 pick, for example? Like, you're gonna give me another Jason Crowder, or you're gonna give me another Jason Tatum, or another and who are the look at the Cavs' record with the 1 pick, right? So I don't think either of this team is a stellar draft record, right? So I don't think that.
Well, I don't think the Cavs did too badly. I mean,
they got Kyrie.
Kyrie was, I think, from what I can remember off the top of my head, he was the best player in that area that was taken.
He was the best player, and but look at
Bennett was a huge disaster, but he was a huge disaster in a draft class full of huge disasters. And then they took Andrew Wiggins. They used that trade for Kevin Love. I don't think they win that championship if Kevin Love is not on the team.
That's fine.
So I'm largely, 2 for 3 is pretty good.
Yeah, and so look at the Celtics with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and some of the other guys they've drafted. I'm not as I said, I think the asset that which is the Nets. But
that's one weird. But saying they're going to screw up the pick, they could have traded it for somebody else. They could have done a lot of other things with it.
Yeah, but
and I understand the trade from the Celtics perspective. I'm not saying it's a disaster or anything like that. But I think it's more, if I were giving grades on this trade, which I never actually did, I would have given Cleveland a higher grade than I would have given Boston because I think there are more ways that this works out. Also, I'm not completely sold on Kyrie being a franchise changer.
The thing about
being the guy.
The thing about that trade, and we'll talk about it when we get to the Celtics, is this is a trade that's more about the next 5 years than it is about this year for the Celtics. And it also is about addressing their flaws in the playoffs because basically Kyrie is taller Isaiah Thomas, and this is a good thing because whereas Isaiah Thomas's game, again, same thing that happens to Kyle, which is basically you can physically take Isaiah Thomas out of a playoff game once the whistles go in the officials' pockets. We know you really can't do that with Kyrie. He's a taller player, and he can't get taken out physically. There's other ways to do that. But I think with the coaching that he's going to get, as I said, I really do believe he's going to see the best coaching he's seen in his entire career. And I think that's going to make a difference. And I think they traded for a guy they went from a guy who had severe flaws and limited your upside in the playoffs to a guy who doesn't. Now, is Kyrie the guy? No. I think him and Hayward are, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Celtics, but him and Hayward are, to me, twos, right? So they're stars. They're not that elite level. But they mean when you have 2 stars and then a guy like Horford who's also at that level, that puts you there. And they just kind of have to hit with one of all these. They still have a bunch of picks, right? So they just have to hit on one of these guys. So maybe Tatum, one of these guys has to hit and be that person to get to the. So it's kind of like what happened with the Warriors. The Warriors were great, but really they hit on Green. So hitting on Green is what really drove the Warriors to the next level. And it wasn't even the high pick. You have to kind of get some luck. It's the same thing with Spurs. The Spurs are still around because they hit on Kawhi. Right, and that you kind of have to hit on that guy. And I think like having the right talent, and they do, and just trying to look for that other guy is the key. I think, again, getting back to Cleveland, I think my problem with Cleveland is that, I mean, their depth is better because they added Crowder, and Crowder makes them a lot more flexible. I'm assuming they're going to get Wade at some point. And I kind of like Derrick Rose as a second piece. I mean, the problem with them is like now they don't have anybody who can guard at point guard, right? Which is a problem in the regular season, but isn't a big problem in the playoffs. We've seen that because all they do in the playoffs is... So the Cavs were terrible defensively in the regular season last year. Terrible. But once the playoffs rolled around and they could put... Like, they could have LeBron bump the hell out of the guy who's handling the ball, or like somebody else bump the hell out of them, then they became a lot better defensively because of the change in rules. And I think the same kind of rules apply. To beat this team defensively, you need a scoring wing, which, and look at the Indiana series, and look at what Paul George did, and look at what like Kevin Durant did to them in the finals. And I think their teams around them kind of got better in that direction. Hayward. So I think they have a rougher road. This isn't a regular season team by any chance, so I think, again, we're coming back to we like the under, right?
Oh, yeah, this is an underplay for me.
What about the MVP odds?
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask you about. So LeBron he's 5 or 6 to 1.
They're not going to win enough.
The big issue, they're not going to win enough games, and I think LeBron's going to take more time off, and so I don't think he cares about it at this point. So, maybe he wins it on the logic, I think, might be that this is a weaker year, that nobody has a superlative like Russell Westbrook triple-double, Steph Curry incandescent year, and so he just kind of is the best of a weak crop, but I don't see that happening.
Would you rather have LeBron at 6 to 1 to win the MVP this year, or LeBron at 6 to 1 to win the MVP next year? Blind. This is blind.
I would probably say next year because the novelty, if he's on a new team, could be something like, if let's say next year he goes to the Lakers.
Yeah, get excited, Laker fans.
And the Lakers go from winning like 30 games to winning 55 games. Yeah, I could absolutely see him winning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's the key there. I don't think they're going to win. They're not going to win enough games. He's not going to care enough. So, I think it's under. It's play for both of us. Do you like I don't like their division odds. Do you like their conference odds? Like, you get slightly less than $1 back. I don't.
That's about right, but it's again, it's kind of like some of those Wizards ones where there are just better things on the board. Like, I think you could make some money with that. I do think they're the pretty meaningful favorites to win. I think they are going to win the conference, but I mean, you're just sitting there going, well, is that the best ROI you have? And I don't think it's the best ROI you have. So I would consider it. I think that's definitely the best bet. What?
Do you like their title odds? 6 to 1.
No.
I'm the same way. It's like, I think here's the thing. I think 6 to 1 is right, but they already got that one, right? So
that's a good way of putting
it. They're not. It's not happening again. It's like, and I couldn't see them beating. So how far in the West would I have to go to be better than 6 to 1? Like, they're not beating the Warriors. They're not beating the Spurs. They're not beating the Rockets. Who do we have? Like, who does Vegas has a fourth? Vegas has the Thunder. I would not have them with the Thunder. Would you? Not with George.
I would because I think it's going to take the Thunder one more. It would take them one more year to figure it out. I also don't think they're going to be together that one more year.
As I said, the problem with like the Cavs defense falls apart when when the team has a threat on the wing, that defense can't handle it. It's like, so if you've got Westbrook and George, like, the Cavs defense is going to have nightmares. They can't cover it. Well, I mean, they
have Jay Crowder now. I think they'll figure it out.
Ooh, would you have them over
Because remember, they're going to play Andre Robertson, and that gives LeBron the ability to freelance like he likes to.
This is crazy.
I would love that series. That would be an incredible. I mean, probably Bucks is the closest we're going to get to it, but a theoretical, like, if in a top 16 format, a Cavs Thunder series would be just so much fun.
You know that Vegas has Minnesota 5th in the West. Good Lord.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that. So I think...
So with Cleveland, I would say if you're going to make a bet, if you are an optimist on them, your conference bet is by far the best. I would even consider putting a little bit on that just because I think they're better than everybody else.
The best bet on the board is the under for the Cavaliers.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm saying if you're an optimist, the best bet is the conference odds. But no, yeah, under play, absolutely.
Yeah, I think 53 is 53.5 is very, very rich for what this team is, right? I don't think this team is better than it was last year, particularly since I don't think Isaiah Thomas is going to play until, like, what would you put that, like, January, February? What do you think?
I was thinking more around Christmas.
He's coming back from a hip. Based on the medical reports I read, it's kind of an interesting.
You probably know this better than I do. Not only given your Celtics proclivity, but just because I was gone when a lot of the trade hullabaloo was happening. So
yeah, basically, like everybody knew he didn't have surgery, and it's a bit of a weird injury. And again, the problem with him is like, so he relies so much on quickness. Then that injury really worked. Like, I know why the Celtics made that trade based on the health report. I wish they hadn't given up Jay Crowder. I would have much rather given up Jaylen Brown. I don't like Jaylen Brown. We'll get to that.
Well, and let's get there, because now let's talk about the Celtics. So the Celtics won 53 games last year, and Vegas set their over/under at either 54.5 or 55.5. And I want to start this with a basic question for you, which is, are the Celtics better?
The Celtics are better over the next 5 years. I don't believe they're better this year. And what I mean by that is they're younger, right? So they're younger. They're going to miss Jay on the wing on defense. They're going to miss Avery Bradley on the wing on defense. So they lost to really extremely good defenders. Now, the caveat to that is they also lost to Taya Thomas, who was one of the worst defenders in the league. And they got taller. Like, Kyrie isn't great, but he's better. But a lot of this on this team relies on kind of younger players. So I kind of think that they're going to lose a little bit of a step. I mean, I respect Stevens. I think Stevens does a good job of getting talent out of players. But if I was picking a number out of the air, I'd say they're going to win 51 games. Right? I think they're going to be about the same as they were last year because they lost some things, but they gained some things. But I do think that this team is better built now for the playoffs because they don't have the flaws that they have, and they're better positioned now for the next 4 or 5 years because this is a younger team that's going to get better. Kyrie's young. That over-under number comes down to so what am I getting out of Jason Tatum? Well, I think Jason Tatum, by all rights, should probably be the starter on this team.
Starting where?
I think Jason Tatum should be starting at the 4 come February or March for this team, really.
So here, actually, let's do it. This is an easier way to visualize it. What would be your starting 5 for the Celtics?
My starting 5 for the Celtics would be Terry Rozier, Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, and Al Horford. That's where
wow. So you'd start Rozier?
I would rather play. I've always been on the school that I would rather play Kyrie at the 2 than at the 1. I mean, I can play him at the 1, but I would rather have him at the 2 because he's such a great spot-up shooter and such a great three-point shooter that I'd rather have him kind of putting pressure.
Well, see, I think you do that, but you have Gordon Hayward handle the ball more. I don't think you need another guy on top of that. It's kind of a hat on hat.
Well, but here's the thing: Terry Rozier was and I gave so much hate on Twitter for Terry Rozier, but Terry Rozier was actually really good in the second half of last season, and he was really good in the playoffs. And I think part of the reason, one of the other reasons they made that trade and they moved the talent is I think they kind of think that he might be good enough to be either the starting point guard or kind of the sixth man coming off the bench. He's a little small, but he can do it. As I said, I would rather have Kyrie not necessarily be the number 1. I would rather have him be the 2 than come in at the 1 and kind of be the switch guy because I want Kyrie taking spot-up shots. So I'd rather have him offensively in the role that Avery Bradley would take when he was hot for this team. So when the Celtics were really good, you'd have guys like Bradley or Crowder kind of hitting all the threes and kind of spotting up, and Kyrie's really good at that, right? So if I've got him here on the wing and attacking, then I think that's kind of a really good use of the skill. Plus, it gets me more plus players on the board. I've got Hayward who can handle the ball, and I also need another rebounder on the court, which is, you can tell I thought a lot about this. Tatum might be the best rebounder or the best potential rebounder I have, and I don't trust Morris to be my starter come playoff time. I would imagine that long-term Tatum's more likely to be my starting 4 than anything else. And again, you notice that, and
I think long term you're right, but how I would start the season, and obviously you're going to change this based on circumstances.
Kyrie Smart.
I would start Kyrie, Jaylen Brown.
No, Jaylen
Gordon.
Brown. Why Jaylen Brown? Why?
Because I think what I would do defensively is I would run, and then I would run Marcus Morris, and basically the idea is that you're just going to be versatile and you're just going to switch a bunch of stuff, and Kyrie's going to handle that, and then you're going to. I think that would work relatively well, and then offensively you're going to be fine. It'll work itself out.
Is Jaylen Brown a guy you could see being the 3rd best guy on a championship team? Could you see him being a starter on a championship team?
Not right now, but eventually, possibly.
You see, the problem with so here's the problem. The reason I really wish that they somehow figure out to put Jaylen Brown, I think Cleveland wanted him, put Jaylen Brown in the trade rather than Jay Crowder. I would much rather have Jay Crowder because Jay Crowder lets me do a lot more things. Whereas Jaylen,
right now, mean, that's why they made this move for like who's going to be better 3 years from now.
So if I have Jaylen Brown on the court, that means I don't have Smart. So I would rather have Smart on the court. I would rather have Rozier on the court. I would rather have Hayward on the court. I would rather have Jason Tatum on the court. I'd rather have Gerson Jabzule rather than like Jaylen Brown. You know, as I said, he was the 3 pick, yes, on one of the worst drafts in the history of time. Which spot does he go in this draft?
There's a challenge with that, though, because I think this draft went very different from my own board. For me, he probably would have been below Isaac, but I had Isaac above Jason Tatum. So I think I probably would have had Jaylen below Tatum. But the thing about it is, you're not comparing apples to apples because Jaylen Brown already has a year in the NBA. I think Jaylen Brown, even if you had Tatum as a better prospect, Jaylen Brown has a year in the NBA. He'll be better this year than Tatum.
Let's assume he's coming out, he doesn't have a year in the NBA. So it's Jaylen Brown as he was before he had a year in the NBA. Where does he go in the 2017 draft?
I would have probably had him. I probably would have had him like 7th or 8th on my board, somewhere like that.
I think he probably goes to the Hornets at 11 because I don't think are the Timberwolves taking him.
Well, no, but you don't do it pick by pick. You do it with where he would have been on your board because you get into the isolated picks. I mean, yeah, the Knicks might have done something stupid again, but the Knicks do something stupid all the time.
Well, I think
I mean, for me, you know, I had Dennis Smith 3rd, so I'm not going to say.
I would rather have Nick, and I would rather have Dennis Smith Jr. and I'd rather have Zach Collins than I would. You gotta get me to like Malik Monk before I go like, yeah, that's probably where he goes. Yeah, maybe you take him over to Aaron Fox, but I don't think so. I mean, the thing I'm trying to get to is like, and I know people love Jaylen Brown, but like I haven't seen it. I think he's a guy who's going to wind up being like a 7th or 8th man, and the problem is on this team, I don't have the minutes for him. So because I would rather have the minutes that he would go to Smart, as I said, Smart. I would rather have them go to Hayward. I would rather have them go to Tatum, who needs the minutes. I would rather have them go to Terry Rozier, who needs the minutes. So he's like on my depth chart 8th or 9th. So why did I keep him instead of like maybe talking the Cavs into taking him over Crowder, right? And maybe I talk him into taking him over Crowder, and then maybe I get him to like not take maybe you don't take the Nets pick.
Well, but here's why you do it that way, because if Boston was doing a recalibration and a shift, if they didn't think they were good enough to be a championship team this year with Jay Crowder, in the future, if we're looking forward, the idea of him being a good player and a good contract, he's going to be getting older, and his contract will be getting shorter, so it'll be getting worse. And Jaylen Brown will be getting better, and they'll still have match rights on the end of that. So if you're kind of equivalent of punting on this year, or largely punting on this year, then you have to change your expectations. Like I think that Jay Crowder is absolutely miles better as a player right now. But if you were to say who's going to provide more value from 2018 to 2020 or 21, I think you can make a very good argument that it's Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, it comes down to the fact that, again, the problem is also I don't know that like the Celtics want a world in which they have to play in 2,000 minutes. Jaylen Brown. That's the problem. Because
I don't think they're in a world where they have to play anybody that many minutes if they don't deserve it. I mean, when I say Jaylen Brown is like he's my 5th starter, that is subject to a million other guys outperforming him. I mean, like, Marcus Smart's in the mix. I probably wouldn't have Rozier in the mix.
Do you think Jaylen Brown?
Yeah, Tatum's there.
You think Brown's value is going to be higher than is his value going to be any higher than it was this summer? I think his value is going to go down. Basically,
it could be. I mean, I'll need to see it. I mean, the challenge was he looked inconsistent last year, and so they have a better idea of where he is right now than we do. I saw him in summer league; he looked fine. You know, it didn't blow my socks up, but you know, Jason Tatum really didn't either. So we'll just have to see with it. And in terms of value proposition, yeah, it's entirely possible that we'll be watching him at the end of this year and thinking, well, yeah, he's not going to be a starter on a team as good as the Celtics want to be. But that's sort of a separate question.
I hope I'm wrong, but like everything I've seen so far leads me to think like he's a nice piece, but not a great one. And I'm mad that they kind of, I think, valued him more than they should have.
Well, I mean, to me, the big mistake in all that, and we don't need to talk about this long, but you and I haven't talked about it at all, is that the bigger mistake wasn't the Kyrie trade, it was giving away Markelle Fultz. Like, Markelle Fultz had this ludicrously high ceiling, and yeah, maybe it doesn't work out, maybe you get into everything else, but with Markelle Fultz, you have the guy who can take you into the stratosphere. You talked about the idea of Draymond Green, that somebody really outperforms it. Before they needed Draymond Green, they need a Steph Curry or a Kevin Durant. I think Fultz gave them a much better shot of that than Tatum does.
There's some noise out there, like apparently the Kyrie thing was like longer. That was out there beforehand. So I think that was actually I think they thought, they were already not thinking they needed a point guard. There's a possibility that's kind of what happened. And I would have rather... I don't disagree with trading Fultz because I think he has flaws, and I would have rather have Ball, and that's who I wanted. But the Lakers were taking Ball, so I get not taking him at the 1 and basically trading out so you get either the Lakers pick or the Kings pick in the next draft. Which, if you were already signed Hayward, which everything I've heard leads me to think that the Hayward thing was a done deal. So the Hayward thing was apparently Hayward is a big League of Legends player. He loves it. He wanted to be in Boston for backseat. He was there there was a CSGO tournament, the final in Boston, the cup for the North American League, and he was there. He wanted to be there. This was a done deal. So they knew Gordon Hayward was on the board. They thought they might get Kyrie. So they didn't want a point guard. And they basically said, okay, we'll punt, we'll get the pick, and we'll also get that Kings or Lakers. So the Celtics are either getting the Lakers pick if I believe it's 2-5 in 2018, or the Kings pick the year after, which will be will be a great pick because the Kings are terrible. So they kind of punted and got Tatum at 3. I disagree with picking Tatum at 3 because I think both you and I liked Isaac better. Is that a fair assessment? You and I both like Isaac better?
Well, and I like Dennis Smith better too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was annoyed because I thought Isaac's, for me, because he's a 7-footer, was a better fit for what this team needed, which is they need a guy who can actually get the boards, because Horford is terrible at rebounds because he's always covering people. So nobody gets rebounds on this team, and they killed that. I thought Isaac was a really good fit. Plus, he has skills. But I agree with you. I like Dennis Smith Jr. I think we still need to talk about him. But, I kind of agree in principle with what they did, given that they ended up with Kyrie, but I wish they hadn't taken Tatum at the 3. I also wish I hadn't taken Jaylen Brown the year before. So I've disagreed with the picks both years. From what I've seen of Tatum might be Tatum is a pick to my model, and he's slightly better than I thought. But again, I'm not convinced yet that he's going to be, they need him to be good, right? And I don't know that that's the case yet. Do you agree with me, basically? Or am I...
I'm not completely sure he's going to be good in ways that are entirely useful. I like Tatum so I thought he was one of the, not the super standouts, but the next level of standouts at the Hoop Summit in 2016. I thought he was intriguing. I thought he was going to do well in college. He did do well in college, but he was outpaced by guys like Fultz. And actually, I really like Jonathan Isaac. He was on his way at that point. He had a weird year for Florida State.
We love Isaac. He's a guy who's I love guys. He's a little bit like Boris Diaw, where he's a guard, and he basically grew. He's also 19, and again, here's my point. I think there's a chance he winds up as a 7-footer by the end, and I would rather have a guy who can play center.
Well, so the other thing with Tatum is that one of the things that he's intriguing on is, his offensive game. He could be useful, but I don't think he's going to be the best offensive player on a good team. And if he's second or third on your focus list on that end, he's just less valuable. He can be a good rebounder. He could be a good defender. Was
there a better defender at the 4 than Isaac, you think, in that draft?
No, what.
Because of watching the tape and seeing that guy, seeing that player at 19 with the ball handling skill that he had because he was a guard and the defense he was playing in college, he was a perfect fit for what the Celtics wanted to do. Because if you were rolling,
if they were going to make the trade down, Smith or Isaac to me would have both been better fits, especially if they were confident that they were getting Gordon Hayward. Then what we talked about this a little bit with the Magic. What I like about Isaac is that he's a complimentary guy. And if the Celtics had that vision for what their team is going to be, they need a complimentary guy more than they need what Tatum's going to be.
Wouldn't you feel miles better about the Celtics if it was Kyrie and either Rozier or Smart, Hayward, Isaacs, and and Al Horford as their go-to? This is their lineup in the playoffs. Isn't that better? I mean, because I'm not asking in that lineup. I'm not asking Isaac to do anything other than cover people on the defend and rebound. That's what I'm asking him to do, right? And if he can do anything else, that's bonus. And I need Tatum. If I'm the Celtics and I have any aspirations this year, I need Tatum to be good. I need somebody to be good at the 4. It's not going to be Jaylen. It's going to have to be Tatum, right? I mean, who else is it going to? It's not going to be Marcus Morris. So I kind of need Tatum to be something that he's more of a finesse player. I don't know if he has that defense yet. Whereas with Isaacs, I thought he was a better fit to what they needed, right? And
yeah, I did too.
This is.
But let's get back. Let's get back to their odds a little bit. We both like the under here.
Yes.
Underplay.
And
then their title odds are 10.5. That are 10.5%. So it would be
11. It's like 11.4 to win the title.
11.4. Yeah, that's way too. That's way too rich for me. I don't think. I think their odds they're way lower than that.
I don't like their 0.2. I don't like their. What do you think of the 2.5 for the conference?
Don't like it at all.
Yeah, I don't love it. What about the 11.4 to win the title?
Nope.
So we like the under on the Cavs and the Celtics. We both agree. I think it's going to be close. I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, I respect Stevens. I think he's going to get them to win, they'll win something similar. They'll win 53 games. But on the under, we're betting the under against 55 and a half, right? Which I think, they can win 55 games, then we win that under bet. Which, I think that if they won 55 games and got the number one seed in the East, they would be extremely happy with that. And here's my take on the Celtics is, this is a very, very young team, right? So the Celtics have, on their roster, they have one...
With a lot of adjustment, too. Remember, this is not only a young team, this is a young team full of guys that haven't played together.
They have 7...
They don't have continuity.
They have 7 guys who didn't play last year in the NBA currently on the roster. They have Yabusele, Tatum, Larkin, Theis, Semi Ojeleye, Kadeem Allen, and Jabari. The 7 guys in the roster that didn't play a minute last year in the NBA. Right.
Well, and Abdul Nader, he played in the D League.
Oh yeah, I don't even have him on the roster. So it's 8. So they have 8 guys. I think if they win 55 games with a roster of all these rookies, then the future is bright. I think it's going to be more like 51. I do think they'll probably get better as the season goes on because they'll figure it out. And they're going to miss Jay, and they're going to miss Avery. Avery Bradley is probably one of the best. I saw a game with Curry and Avery Bradley, and my impression was Curry is crazy. In terms of how fast he shoots, and Avery Bradley is the best on-ball defender I've ever seen in my life live. And they're going to miss that. I do think it's kind of canceled out a little bit by losing Isaiah, but they're going to miss that. They're going to miss Jay on the wing. So, again, I think the under is an obvious bet here. This doesn't mean we think that the Celtics are going to be bad. This just means that we think that 55.5 is kind of a crazy number, right?
Speaking of crazy numbers, Kyrie at 12-1 for MVP is just ludicrous. Or 16 or anything. He's not going to win the MVP.
Volume-wise? How many points a game?
He's not going to do it.
How many points a game?
Remember, they have Gordon Hayward on this team.
True. They're going to play a faster pace, but I agree with you that he's not going to win the MVP.
He's not that guy. I'm a big believer in what Kyrie can do in the playoffs. I mean, I was there for basically the entire 2016 finals. I saw what he did. But as a regular season award, he's not going to do it.
What about Jason Tatum at 12-1?
For Rookie of the Year?
Yes.
That's not terrible. I think I would have him a little lower than that, but it's not terrible. If you're a bigger believer in him than I am, you could throw some money on it.
I don't think he's not going to get the ball enough, right? He's not. That's my feeling on that. He's just not going to get the ball enough to do it. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and remember, there are a lot of point guards in this class. There are a lot of guys who are going to get those counting stats. So he's going to have to. And remember, even if he starts, he's going to be behind in the pecking order. He's going to be clearly behind Hayward and behind Kyrie, probably behind Al Horford, and potentially their 5th starter, whoever the heck that is. So yeah, it's unlikely to me. It's possible, but it's unlikely.
So I think for the East, do we agree that? So who do we think is winning the East this year?
Cleveland, to me.
But I think that the field is a lot more interesting this year, and I think out of the field,
sure.
Who do you like out of the field in the East? Milwaukee, Washington.
Well, so relative to their current numbers, I would say Milwaukee, but I would say Boston overall, just because I think they just have the most talent. But I'd say it's Boston and Milwaukee are probably the 1 and 2. It might even be Milwaukee, just because Giannis is special in a way that none of the Boston guys have proven so far.
Yeah, it might be one of the situations where we get Milwaukee beats Cleveland, we get a Milwaukee Boston final, conference finals, which would be
wild.
Which would be everybody forgets that Detroit Piston teams that lost to the Cavs team. You remember who the best player on that Detroit Piston team was?
I always think of it as Rip, but it probably wasn't.
No, it was Chris Webber.
Really?
Chris Webber was the best player on Chris. Remember, Chris Webber got traded to that Pistons team, and so if you rewatch that series now, it's so Chris Webber is you can see Chris Webber, just his face. It's because he's in the East, you think he's going to get to the finals, and then LeBron happened, and it's just your heart kind of breaks for him a little bit because really that Pistons team was better than that Cavs team. It's just LeBron was just just amazing. And so that's what happened. Do we agree that the best bet on the board is the Raptors to win the division, right?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the best bet on the board, especially because you can get it at 6.5. So, you're getting the higher rate return on it. I think that's a really good thing on that. So I think the big picture thing that I want to say on the Eastern Conference is we know that there are going to be a lot of low-end teams in this division, and who beats who and who picks up extra games is going to really define a lot of this. And I think there's more uncertainty in that for me than maybe there is for some other people.
The fact that we disagreed on the first, we just disagreed on the first 6 picks on the bottom of the East is just an indicator that the bottom of the East is really kind of we have no clue exactly what's going on there. We started to agree more at the top, but I think that it's confusing exactly what's going to happen, and I think that a lot's going to depend on who gets moved where. I do think that there's going to be a lot of tanking teams this year. And there's going to be a lot of weirdness in the East. We'll talk about part of the problem is there's a lot of talent on the other side. You might have, how many 55 teams do you think we have in the West?
Well, let's save that for the West. Yeah, let's save that for the Western part. But
there
are a lot.
I think that's part of what's going on here.
It is. And so, we'll get into that. Well, as always, Eastern Conference, interesting, more disagreement than usual, but thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We still have to do the West, and that's coming soon, guys.
Absolutely. Thanks again to Arturo Galletti for taking the time to come on. You can check out the work that he's going to do actually this year for Daily Roto. He's going to help put together their NBA product. And you can also follow him on Twitter at American Numbers, AmericanNumbers. And considering Arturo is based in Puerto Rico, I want to take a quick second to extend my sympathy to the people, particularly of the Caribbean, who have been dealing with just such a brutal stretch of it, including Hurricane Maria that's going through pretty much as we speak, and Irma, of course, as well earlier, and it's not over yet. So if you choose to support those causes, including the work that Tim Duncan is doing for the Virgin Islands in particular, definitely do so. I highly recommend it. Arturo and I already recorded the second half of this, but as you could guess, for a podcast that runs over 2 hours, these are a bear to edit. So that will be the podcast for next week. I'll probably work on it between now and then. So I'm guessing early next week, but it will be the Real Jam Radio for next week. And it's a lot of fun. We have better teams to talk about in some ways, but we go in some fun directions with it, and of course talk about the league in general as a part of that broadcast. You can hear at different moments in this that we said, hey, let's save that for the second half, and we absolutely do use all of that in the second half. If you want to support this show, there are a lot of great ways you can do it. You can leave a rating, leave a review in the podcast player of your choosing. You can subscribe, you can download every episode. We're still at the point where those metrics really do matter, so we appreciate it. And if you have any feedback on the show, you can reach out, good, bad, indifferent, DanielLeroux&nba@gmail.com, at Daniel Leroux on Twitter. Email's better, but if you take the time to write it, I will take the time to read it. That's the least I can do. And the single best way that you can support this show, and really any other show that has them, is by checking out our advertisers. So for this episode, that is Bombfell, a better way for men to get clothes. I'm really liking the program so far, and it's bombfell.com/realgm. You get $25 off your first order. And FanDuel. So you go to FanDuel.com and join now, enter the promo code RealGM, and you get into a big money contest, and you get to check it out. I really have enjoyed the last couple weeks, and will continue to update on my progress. I wasn't great this past week, but I was also gone part of the weekend, so it wasn't the best for doing research, but I'm excited to keep going with FanDuel, and I really have had fun, and the lack of the year-long fantasy stress has really, I've really enjoyed it so far. So you can check all that out. I already told you what the podcast is. If you have anything that you definitely want to hear before the start of the season, because of course Nate and I are going to do a lot of kind of season preview-y stuff on Dunked On, and my goal with this podcast is always to not overlap with Dunked On whenever possible. So let me know if there's something. I am going to probably have on Sam Vecini at some point. We'll talk about prospects and everything like that, but I want to get a better handle on them before I start talking about him, because I like to have at least some knowledge. So we'll probably do that at some point in the near term, and figuring out everything else from there. So thanks again. If you want to check out Bombfell and FanDuel, you definitely should. And look forward to talking to you all next week with the second half of the mammoth Arturo Galletti podcast. And you should definitely check it out and spread the word. Tell people this is one of the most fun ones we do of the year. So hopefully you check it out. Thanks again. Take care and make it a great day.